281. The meeting between the lion and the emperor. Abaddon, where in the galaxy are you? Qin Yun muttered, scanning Chaos intelligence for any trace of the traitor. Since the fall of Cadia, Abaddon's location had been unknown. Only small bands of Chaos Marines appeared across scattered battlefields. No one had seen the Great Raider himself. Ah, Vigilant Star. He thought of where Abaddon might appear. When Cadia fell, the Great Rift split the galaxy, dividing the Imperium into the Imperium Obscurus and the Imperium Sanctus. The Nachmund Gauntlet, a long corridor near the collapsed Cadia Gate, remained the only reliable passage between the two halves. After the rift opened, every faction focused on that corridor. Before Cadia's fall, Nachmund had been a warp turbulence zone. Imperial trade fleets avoided. But the warp currents changed with the rift's emergence, and somehow that dangerous region became a relatively stable route. That stability, however, wasn't providence but technology. Two Blackstone worlds, Vigilant Star and Accursed Earth, anchored the Gauntlet's fields. If Vigilant Star were captured, or its Blackstone polarity reversed, the route would collapse. Lately, Chaos forces had been massing at Vigilant Star, clearly aiming to seize it and cut communication between Imperium Obscurus and Imperium Sanctus. I need to find a way to draw Abaddon out. Qin Yun stroked his chin. Abaddon wasn't a weak or reckless commander. As first captain of the Shadowmoon Wolves and a member of Horus's Four Kings Council, his strategy and martial skill were peerless, second only to a Primarch. In truth, Abaddon could never be compared to the Primarchs. During the Battle of Terra, he had been overconfident, believing he'd found a weakness in Dorn's lines. He sought out Perturabo to lead a surprise strike, and Perturabo let him, but the raid ended in disaster. The Sons of Horus veterans he led were entombed underground when their tunneling carriers were sealed in concrete. They suffocated slowly and without glory. It was that loss that broke the Sons of Horus and precipitated the Legion's disintegration after the heresy. Abaddon nearly went mad with despair and never again challenged Perturabo. Qin Yun brought up the tactical hologram of Vigilant Star. It lay in the Imperium Obscurus and remained a pivot for the Nachmund Gauntlet. Imperial forces had posted significant garrisons there to guard against a sudden chaos strike. "You can't catch a wolf without risking a cub," he murmured. "If we don't risk Vigilant Star, we can't save Sanguinius." Vigilant Star would be a powerful lure for Abaddon, but now two Primarchs had returned to the field. Even Abaddon would not risk a direct confrontation with them. If the temptation wasn't irresistible, Abaddon would hide in command from the shadows. Qin Yun planned to make the temptation almost impossible to resist, use the Nachmund Gauntlet itself as bait so that the Avenger of Souls would commit forces to it. Once Abaddon entered the fray, Qin Yun would feign one objective and pursue another to recover fragments of Sanguinius's soul. This gamble could cost the Nachmund Gauntlet, but the Imperium was already rebuilding the webway and erecting stargates. If a webway link between Sanctus and Obscurus could be established, dependence on Nachmund would end. Even if the Gauntlet fell, the Imperium would reallocate resources and accelerate webway repairs. Fulgrim had been in the webway working with the Adeptus Mechanicus and allied prophet races on construction, and the Chaos Gods had noticed. They sent hordes of demons to harass the repair crews and even urged Qin Yun to use the Dark Throne to escort the works. Qin Yun ignored them, taking the Emperor as precedent, and ordered the repair teams to use guerrilla tactics. When demon tides rose, Fulgrim would lead the Imperial element to withdraw, while Eldar sealed that section of webway and shifted operations elsewhere. Once the daemon tide passed, specialized teams and players would flush out stragglers, and technicians would resume repairs, advance when the enemy retreated, retreat when the enemy advanced. There would be no decisive, climactic battle, only attritional repair and recovery. There were many webway connections between Sanctus and Obscurus. If one failed, another might work. The Chaos Gods cursed him for it. "I need to check the webway repair progress," Qin Yun decided. "As soon as conditions allow, we'll fish for the Great Raider. If progress is slow, I'll pull the players in to speed up emergency repairs." He summoned Jiling and had her open a channel to Fulgrim. A shimmer of light outlined a clear holographic projection. Fulgrim appeared and saluted. "Saint," he said respectfully. "How goes the webway?" Qin Yun asked. Meanwhile, in the rock fortress, a dark, secret dungeon lay impenetrable. Once it had held Luther, traitor of the Dark Angels, and the place was saturated with warp suppression and dimensional locks. Tech Marines of the Dark Angels had reinforced it to ensure that even daemons could not breach the cell. Azrael and a contingent of elite Dark Angels stood guard outside. Inside the prison, Lionel Johnson was meeting his recently captured brother, Conrad Kurze. "I didn't expect to see you again looking so old. It doesn't suit the invincible Lion," Kurze mocked. "Aging makes me feel more human," Lion replied calmly, not taking the bait. "You are not human. No matter how you look, you are a monster. Genetic craft and warp power gave you to the galaxy." Kurze grinned, white teeth flashing. Lion's voice held no anger. "Whether you call it monster or man, Kurze, that isn't for you to decide." "Haha, then is it up to Father?" Kurze tilted his head. "He's been silent for 10,000 years. Do you still expect him to leap up and slap you on the back?" "He will speak," Lion said. "Guilliman has already spoken with him. The saint has come and will soon speak to me." Lion's words silenced Kurze. After a long, bitter pause, he rasped, "I don't believe it. He is dead, killed by Horus. What sits on the throne now is just a corpse." "I hope you can keep believing that," Lion answered. "His will descend." "The Chaos Gods thought they defeated him with Horus, but they will discover they made an even greater enemy." "Did you come here only to tell me that?" Kurze cut him off. "To boast that you can speak with Father?" Lion looked at his chained brother and smiled faintly. "Sanguinius told me you wanted Father's forgiveness." "You say I'm different from Fulgrim and Magnus," Kurze sneered. "You made an orderly, egalitarian state on Nostromo. During the Great Crusade, you were torn. You wanted Father's success, yet your visions showed the Great Crusade would end in fratricide and ruin. The fall of the Midnight Lords was the last straw. You believed fate immutable, but the events on Davine taught you fate could be shaped. You wanted to kneel on Holy Terra and beg forgiveness." "What nonsense is this?" Kurze barked. "Sanguinius is dead, torn apart by Horus. He couldn't have told you anything." Lion could see panic and unease in Kurze's eyes. His words had struck a nerve. "You carry the gift Father gave you, the ability to become darkness. You should understand the warp." "Death is not an end, it is a waypoint," Lion continued. "When the final battle comes, those who have passed will return to fight for humanity, and Sanguinius will be among them." "What do you want?" Kurze snarled, his powerful body strained against heavy, demon-binding chains that rattled with his fury. These were no ordinary bonds. The prison had been altered specifically to hold a Primarch. After a struggle, Kurze felt his strength ebb, as if the chains siphoned his power. "Your struggle is meaningless," Lion said. "These bindings drain you. The angrier you become, the stronger they grow." Kurze stilled, dark eyes fixed on Lion. "What do you want? To enlighten me? To see me kneel and repent?" Lion shook his head. "No, I only wish to see my brother. If you want confession, wait until you return to Holy Terra. Repent, never. I am not wrong," Kurze roared. "Go tell Father that." Lion turned to leave. "Our time is done, Kurze. Even if I burn in hell, I will not admit my crimes." Kurze's voice echoed as the heavy armored door sealed him inside. Outside the dungeon, Qin Yun finished his conversation with Fulgrim. The webway progress was encouraging, many nodes repaired and dozens of small paths now linked sections of the Imperium. There was not yet a single great corridor capable of bearing massive fleets, but the repairs had reached the point where Qin Yun could press the advantage. He intended to take players into the webway to help build a true passage between Obscurus and Sanctus and sever strategic dependence on the Nachmund Gauntlet. Then Vigilance Star would be the bait to lure Abaddon and recover the fragments of Sanguinius's soul. Before moving on, he intended to honor a prior promise to Lion, open a communication to the Emperor, strengthen a father-son bond, and collect rewards from previous missions. Lion saluted Qin Yun with the respect appropriate to an aide of the Emperor. In Lion's eyes, Qin Yun's position was akin to a trusted executor, entitled to reverence. "Let us go to the sanctum." Qin Yun led him to the sanctum, where a statue of the Emperor stood. Even chapters that kept tensely separate from the ecclesiarchy, like the Dark Angels, maintained sanctums on their vessels to honor the Emperor and the Primarchs. Qin Yun performed the Aquila salute and prayed before the statue. A shaft of light opened and several plump winged cherubs fluttered out, carrying a small reliquary. Their appearance had softened since Qin Yun last saw them. They were less terrifying, almost adorable, proof, he thought, that the better the Imperium's fortunes, the kinder the image of these little angels became. In darker times they had been monstrous. "Lion," Qin Yun said, and the lion returned the salute. Then something vast and terrible swept through the warp and descended on the rock fortress. It struck everyone, psychers and mundane alike, with a force like a thunderclap. Qin Yun's body was filled with light. His consciousness blacked out and then shifted, as if he were looking through the eye of a black sun. He felt for a moment that he might hurl a spear of light into Khorne's domain, but there was only vision, no authority, no power. Old, private resentment flared in him. "You heartless old man, you're even guarding against your own people, aren't you?" he thought. On Holy Terra, the cherubic angels that should have returned to the sanctuary halted and turned toward Qin Yun, circling and singing hymns. The will that had descended was so potent every soul in the fortress perceived it. Librarians like Ezekiel trembled with overwhelming awe. To psychers, the will felt both holy and familiar. Deep in the dungeon, the imprisoned horrors screamed at the sensation, fearful that the Lord of Humanity's wrath would reduce them to ash. Kurz felt that will too, the pull of his bloodline, and his voice broke into a small, frightened whisper. "Father." He curled instinctively, terrified. In the sanctum, the lion's face lit with a fierce, almost pained joy as the familiar presence occupied the saint and then the saint's body. The lion sensed that the will moving through that body was no longer merely the saint's own. It was the Father's, one and the same. The closeness of that bond stung him with a hint of jealous longing. The saint's connection to the Emperor was deeper than even his own. All at once, the lion managed only a strained, reverent utterance. "Father." A million voices, countless echoes, answered in the lion's mind, rumbling like distant thunder. 282. The laughing god is about to take on the form of Slaanesh. The others in the sanctuary dropped to one knee, greeting the supreme ruler of humanity. A fierce light burst from Qin Yun's body and washed over Lion. Nobody could hear what passed between them. Across the void, Qin Yun's form turned into a black sun, and in an instant his gaze swept the galaxy. "This feeling, it's intoxicating. I can't stop," came the first voice. "Is this the sight of a god who knows and controls everything?" "No, the Emperor is not a god. Speaking of which, Huang Laohan is petty. When will he let me take on those 4 bastards? I want to punch Nurgle, that fat slob, and kick Slaanesh, that decadent one." Qin Yun muttered to himself as he regarded the domains of the Chaos Gods. Khorne's realm was always a crimson expanse of endless hacking and slaughter. Tzeentch's domain writhed like a tangled knot of bird beaks, countless heads pulling in every direction until form itself was unrecognizable. Nurgle's territory was a rotten garden, populated by bloated figures who treated decay like a pastime. Slaanesh's domain resembled a grotesque carnival in perpetual motion. The Chaos Gods felt Qin Yun's gaze and looked back, annoyed. "We're no more than chess pieces. Must you watch us like that?" Qin Yun could only stare and do nothing. After a moment, he turned away. "What else can I see?" He wondered. "What is Erebus doing?" Erebus, the galaxy's most notorious villain, rejected the Emperor. Qin Yun could not fix a precise location. He could, however, piece together fragments of images, a warship piled with corpses, and a course set for the Coronis expanse. "What is that scoundrel plotting now?" Qin Yun asked himself. Erebus's destination was dangerously close to Qin Yun's base in the Calixis sector. The Coronis expanse being targeted could only mean trouble aimed at him. He resolved to guard against the villain. Erebus's maneuvers convinced Qin Yun that the Coronis expanse needed to become Imperial territory. A sector was an area under formal Imperial governance, with a complete trade and military apparatus. An expanse was a region of colonies not yet formally absorbed. Often millennia could pass between discovery and full conquest. The Calixis sector had taken a long time to be established. With the players in play, however, Qin Yun felt the Coronis expanse could soon be formalized under the Imperium. The Fourth Calamity's energy would sweep through the locals like a storm. "Should I issue an explorer's decree?" he thought. He had an idea that would maximize the players' enthusiasm, grant them pioneering rights. Any planet they conquered would become their dominion without turning them into slaveholders. The fourth calamity's moral baseline was alarmingly low. Demons themselves would recoil. If players were allowed to act freely, chaos could be turned on its head and whitewashed into benevolence. So strict legal frameworks were necessary. Many players didn't relish fighting. Some preferred to build and govern. Letting them claim and civilize worlds would be an efficient use of manpower. Competitions could follow to reward the best governors. A horde of players would stampede into the Coronis expanse. Let's see what Erebus could do then. Just as Qin Yun was sketching plans to develop the frontier and hem in rogues like Erebus, his vision blurred and the images vanished. He was thrown back into the sanctuary of the rock fortress. The cherub beat its wings and slipped into the light. Apparently the father-son reunion was over. Lion stood where he had been, stunned, his eyes rimmed with red. The emotions of seeing a long-lost father had overwhelmed him. He had slept for 10,000 years and awoken to white hair. For a moment he couldn't tell which of them was father and which son. "Lion?" Qin Yun called softly. Lion blinked and swallowed down the torrent of feeling. "You saw me at my worst, Saint." "That's only human," Qin Yun replied, keeping the deeper thoughts to himself. "My business here is finished. I have other matters to attend." He planned to repair the webway and lay a trap for Abaddon, that cunning foe. Lion hesitated. Working with Qin Yun was exhilarating, far better than dealing with that pompous Gilliman. If only the father had created a saint 10,000 years sooner, perhaps, Lion thought, he might have replaced Horus as War Master and led humanity to unmatched glory. "If you need anything urgent," Qin Yun added, "call for me. With a god chosen at your side, I can descend any time." After a brief conversation, Qin Yun and his retinue departed. Using the Lighthouse teleportation network, they traveled to Gomorrah to repair the webway and open a passage between the Imperium Sanctus and the dark side. No sooner had he arrived in Gomorrah than Qin Yun summoned Sealing. Her response was instant. "Master, help me draft a couple of small data packs," he said. "What kind?" "The first is for the webway. Increase rewards. If someone opens a webway route between the Imperial Dark Side and the Imperium Sanctus, grant significant rewards." The second concerns the Coronis expanse. It's a melting pot of species, and it's time to bring it under Imperial law. Grant players pioneering rights. Anyone who conquers a planet and pledges to rule by Imperial code will gain dominion. Sealing also put together minor packs, searches for ancient treasures, rare metals, and notable conflicts. Qin Yun had plans for a larger pack, the Battle of Vigilance Star, but that could only launch after the webway link was opened. If Abaddon refused to leave the Eye of Terror, a premature call would be pointless. Sealing worked quickly and produced the two small packs in no time. Data Pack, Coronis Expanse Pioneering Act. Since 997 of the 40th millennium, when the Coronis Expanse was first charted, humanity has probed this mysterious region. Countless adventurers have crossed the maw to seek lost relics and hidden riches. Many lives were lost, but brave humans came in wave after wave in the Emperor's name, claiming wealth and spreading Imperial glory. As the Calixis sector stabilized, the question of expansion returned to the fore. For a civilization to endure, it must maintain an expansionist posture. Given present circumstances, Imperial rulers have decided to entrust pioneering to those favored by the Emperor. Anyone who conquers a planet and pledges to rule under Imperial law will gain dominion. For details, enter the game and inquire at the landing port. Plus, thought for the day. To question the Emperor is heresy. Data Pack. Chasm becomes thoroughfare. After Abaddon the Despoiler destroyed Cadia, the Imperium was sundered, making travel and communication difficult. Humanity currently depends on one Nachmund gauntlet to bridge the rift, a narrow passage that the gods could sever at any time. More routes are needed. The ancient webway can ignore warp storms, but has been shattered. The dark gods will resist any attempt to restart it, but humanity does not yield. The Imperium plans to invest resources to rebuild a webway connection between the Imperium Sanctus and the dark side. Anyone who successfully repairs a webway leading to the dark side will receive generous rewards. For details, enter the game and inquire at Gomorrah. Thought for the day. Loyalty is the only gift we can offer the Emperor. Qin Yun checked the text, approved it, and nodded. Sealing, well done. Sealing puffed out her chest, pleased. Of course, Sealing is Master's most capable assistant. Same as always, schedule the release for 1800 hours. Understood. Shilling acknowledged and vanished. Qin Yun stepped out onto a balcony and looked over the rebuilding city of Gomorrah. He stood atop a building of the Adeptus Mechanicus. After expelling the Dark Eldar and sealing the rifts, the Imperium had begun reconstruction, determined to control this crucial webway node. Arc Eldar streamed in from across the webway, gathering in the ancient city and attempting to rebuild it as a new homeland. Gomorrah had once been a central webway city. During the Eldar's fall, many fled into the webway and took refuge in its nodal cities. Gomorrah had harbored the largest number of refugees, including high-ranking dignitaries of the Eldar. These functionaries had brought with them the decadent customs of the Spirit Race Empire. Some Eldar left to join the Arcs, but now, with the Dark Eldar expelled and the Saint signed to a covenant with them, many Arc Eldar returned to help rebuild. Eldrad Ulthran and other seers guided and restrained their kin to avoid conflict with humans. Yet pockets of Dark Eldar remained in the webway, furious at the loss of Gomorrah. They branded Eldrad and the Arc Eldar as collaborators who had led humans to occupy their home. By their lights, Arc Eldar deserved death alongside humanity. They mounted clandestine attacks throughout the webway, massacring Imperial personnel and Arc citizens. The Imperium responded in kind, forming joint squads to strike first whenever Dark Eldar were found. Skirmishes flared constantly across the webway. Footsteps sounded behind Qin Yun as an attendant came in and bowed. "Saint, what is it?" Qin Yun did not turn. "Eldrad Ulthran, seer of the Usva Arc world, and Hyrandri the Veilwalker have brought several Eldar who wish to see you," the attendant said. "News travels fast. Let them in." A moment later, Eldrad Ulthran and Hyrandri entered, escorting a tall Eldar in resplendent attire, wearing a jester's mask. Qin Yun studied him for a beat, then smiled. He had guessed who the newcomer was. "Welcome, Sigorak, the laughing god of the Eldar." "Ha! Ha! Ha!" A laugh full of mirth and mockery burst from the tall Eldar behind the mask, filling the room. As expected of the incarnation of the human lord, most perceptive, the masked figure intoned. "I am Sigorak, the Eldar, who mocks fate. This form is my avatar, my mask walking among mortals." The voice had an operatic lilt. The figure was not Sigorak's true form, but a harlequin, a sublime avatar playing the role of the laughing god. Qin Yun opened his comms. "Send some good wine." "To receive such hospitality from the saint is an honor," the harlequin said, bowing. "Visitors are welcome." Qin Yun gestured for them to sit. Servants brought wine and dishes. A hand moved to uncork a bottle until Qin Yun waved the servants away. "You may leave. I will receive my guests myself." He uncorked the bottle, poured, and handed a glass to the harlequin, then to Eldrad and Hyrandri in turn. "Why has the laughing god come to see me?" The harlequin swirled his wine. "Do you wish to join the saint in striking at the Dark Prince's domain?" Qin Yun blinked. The laughing god proposed leading troops to assault Slaanesh's realm? It was like a demure maiden wanting to stroll into a den of thieves. She would be corrupted in a day. He let the warning hang unspoken. As expected of the god of laughter, those words are truly amusing. Qin Yun nodded as he drank. His goblet was enormous, like the Horn of Plenty from Greek myth. With a Primarch-level body, a mortal cup was barely a thimble to him. "You think I'm joking?" The exalted incarnate's voice carried that exaggerated, theatrical cadence only a clown could wear. "Otherwise," Qin Yun looked him straight in the eye. "What do you call Slaanesh, the Dark Prince? You won't even speak his true name, and yet you want me to ally with you to invade the realm of pleasure. What is that, if not a joke?" At the name Slaanesh, Eldrad and Hyrandri both flinched ever so slightly. The Eldari's fear of Slaanesh is written into their souls. "We don't need to defeat him," the exalted incarnate said. "We only want the crone swords and Sanguinius's soul." "So, as the god of laughter, you're aware I'm trying to revive Sanguinius," Qin Yun said calmly. "Gods see things mortals do not. Glimpsing the future and current shifts in the warp is easy for a being like him. After Cygnus, Sanguinius's manifesting with help from the exalted incarnate would have echoed through the warp. Guessing Qin Yun's intentions wasn't hard. It's a win-win, Saint. We both get what we want." The exalted incarnate studied Qin Yun. With humanity's present strength and our cooperation, we could invade Slaanesh's domain. Humanity can't wage an interdimensional war yet. Qin Yun's mind was steady. The Imperium seemed prosperous on the surface, but danger still lurked everywhere. Unreformed worlds, threats like orcs and tyrannids, internal corruption, cults. Strained at home and under external pressure, humanity would likely crumble if it opened a campaign into Slaanesh's realm. Worse, if the Eldari used the opportunity to seize the Crone Swords, they could trigger their God of Death summoning and kill Slaanesh as prophesied. With humanity devastated by that war, the Eldari would be free to rise unchecked, an elegant two-birds-one-stone scheme. The implication was blindingly obvious. That's a shame. The Exalted Incarnate shook his head. I intended to use the Black Library as bait, open it to humanity first, raise your civilization's strength, then execute this plan. Qin Yun's heart skipped. The Black Library, an old one legacy rumored to contain the galaxy's collective knowledge, could, if obtained and absorbed, catapult humanity to the top tier. Then he shook his head and cleared his thoughts. It was bait, plainly laid. The Exalted Incarnate watched Qin Yun move from temptation to clarity and furrowed his brows slightly. The outsider seemed to know of the Black Library. The warp rumors were true. He was from a higher dimension and aware of secrets many missed. This condition is tempting, Qin Yun said, smiling faintly. How about this? First, open the Black Library to humanity. Once we're strong enough, the two races can jointly declare war on the gods. If we're going to fight, let's fight big. Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, all of them. Pacify the warp completely, yes? Eldrad and Hyrandry exchanged looks. He's only half drunk and already grandstanding. 2 sips and he's talking about punching Nurgle and conquering the warp. If you let him keep drinking, would the whole universe become his? Hot air while drinking, every species has its boasters. The Exalted Incarnate laughed, a clownish sound. You are amusing, chosen of the Lord of Mankind. Only ordinary, Qin Yun replied, smiling. Compared to you. He regarded the Exalted Incarnate. What do you think of my suggestion? Unless you send troops to attack Slaanesh's domain, we will not open the Black Library. The Exalted Incarnate shook his head. The Black Library was the Eldari's last anchor. If humanity gained it and mastered its knowledge, especially with the Avenging Sun, the Lion, and the Outsider aiding them, humanity would soar. The sparsely populated Eldari would be ants beneath humanity's heel. To entrust an entire race's fate to another's goodwill was a gamble Cyrog would not take. That's a pity. Then cooperation is impossible. Qin Yun feigned regret, but did not linger. Shall we enjoy more wine? Let me perform my duties as host. The Exalted Incarnate showed no disappointment. As the god of laughter, Cyrog carried no sorrow. This wine is good, but it's far from the finest. There are many avenues for cooperation besides a joint attack on Slaanesh's domain. For example, Qin Yun raised an eyebrow. For example, reconciling the interests of our races, allocating webway navigation rights, sharing some knowledge. The Exalted Incarnate admitted, I lack absolute wisdom, but I know a little about most things in the galaxy. That's an intriguing topic. Qin Yun considered this. There are things I want to understand. Ask. Where does a god's authority come from? As expected of an outsider, sharp questions. The Exalted Incarnate sipped his cup. The wine was bitter compared to Eldari vintages. In art and cuisine, humanity lagged far behind. Can you explain? Of course. For mortals, this is complex, but for gods, it's instinctive from birth. He began. There are 2 types of gods. One kind comes from the laws of the Holy Terra universe. Those are the star gods. Their authority stems from the universe's laws. The stronger the mortal realm, the stronger those gods. Crucially, the laws gave rise to them. They do not own those laws. The second kind are the gods of the warp. Tzeentch and the like are born from the emotional and spiritual projections of sentient beings. When an emotion grows strong enough, it forms an echo in the warp and gains consciousness. That is the birth of a daemon. When that emotion imprints upon the warp perpetually, a god is born. Every powerful civilization breeds its own pantheon, born from myths and stories. People imagine a god of agriculture to ensure harvests, and when belief concentrates, that god accrues power. The warp's authority thus arises from the emotions and needs of sentient beings. They talked long into the evening. Qin Yun asked many questions about the warp and the gods, and the picture became clear. The Warhammer universe, outwardly material and governed by physical laws, runs on idealism beneath the surface. Strong, unified belief can carve reality in the warp. Human will, if concentrated enough, can make a place for itself, a truth evidenced by the Grand Master of the Grey Knights, the Justicar, who proved that human resolve can overcome Tzeentch. Thank you for your guidance, God of Laughter. Qin Yun bowed slightly, showing respect to Cyrog. The exalted incarnate chuckled. He was always laughing, as if the universe itself were a joke. It has been some time since I've had such a conversation. It's pleasant. Beyond warp theory, the two parties reached practical agreements. Qin Yun promised to issue a legal code for coexistence. Where humans and Eldari lived together, conduct would be governed by fair law. The Eldari would increase cooperation, sharing webway access, investing technology and materials to repair it, and teaching humanity better wraithbone cultivation. For a while, relations looked mutually beneficial. When the meeting ended, Qin Yun personally escorted them out. At 6 that evening, 2 small data patches edited by Zealing were posted to the Warhammer 0L official announcement board. As always, the site traffic spiked immediately. The front page was flooded with first post shouts. Little fish, first, Wudang Yeshangwang, first. After the scramble for top comments subsided, normal reactions poured in. At Littlefish, why are you first? Littlefish, no choice. Fast fingers. Horace, you guys don't work at all, eh? All you do is fight for first place. Hellfire deporting. If internal testers were chosen by comment speed, you'd all be in already. Might of the God. Why don't I have internal testing? I want to pledge to the Emperor too. Plasma is not Melta. My moon base is full of piles, and I still haven't got a slot. Giving Up Boy is back. Hunger marketing, definitely teasing us. Watermelon skin handsome guy. It's torture, I just watch and can't play. Now they're even repairing the webway, and I still don't have a slot. Recite 1,000 times. Please don't update so fast. Let the kids catch up. The announcement broke 10 million views in a minute and passed 100 million in an hour. All real traffic. Companies drooled. Offers to buy ad links on the official site proliferated, and scams followed. Someone swindled over 200 billion by claiming official connections and the ability to post links. For unknown reasons, the scammers vanished with the money, an incident that lit up social media. The official statement was brief. The funds were recovered, and the episode had prompted anti-fraud publicity. Players in-game reacted immediately to the patch. Dora Workshop, having grown into a military-industrial behemoth over recent months, saw the Frontier Act as expansion gold. If their weapons proved themselves in the Coronis War, sales would surge. Their private armies could open colonies and secure resources. We must take the largest share. Dora mobilized his players for deployment. MC Dynasty moved quickly too, marshaling forces and preparing to advance into the Coronis expanse. They had captured Tyrannid hive ships and cultivated swarms as cannon fodder. The College of Agriculture signed up as well. Beyond sending vegetable soldiers, Mushroom and other players unveiled biome weapons. Thorn vines that could overrun a continent in a week, trees that could alter planetary climates, grass seeds that could devastate ecosystems. Independent adventurers set off for the expanse for danger and relics. The patch to explore the Coronis expanse ignited a frantic rush. Landing Port, a forward station in the expanse, swelled with shipments of resources and military hardware. Merchants followed the tide, and Landing Port thrummed with the energy of so many forces converging. On the webway side, many players also signed up. The webway, an old one construction inherited by the Eldari, once carried unimaginable wealth. Its lost caches could make fortunes and legends out of any player who found them. We found the grand treasure. Charge! The newly promoted Dreamhall Wanderer gathered companions for an expedition into the repaired webway, hunting for Old One and Eldari riches. On their first deep dive into the broken corridors, they stumbled into an ancient city sealed inside the webway. They had hoped to be the first to find it, but instead discovered something unexpected, a jet bike. This emblem looks like the white scars, Labor is Glorious said, wiping dust from the chrome. Never heard of the white scars exploring the webway. Looks a bit big, another player said. Even an Astartes wouldn't fit this size, would he? They exchanged looks, and a name came to mind, one White Scar who might be cruising the webway. Could this be Jagatai Khan's bike? The Dream Hall Wanderer's eyes widened. The bike's here. Where is he? P.S. Another beautiful day. Thank you for your support, brothers. Here's a photo of Jagatai Khan. 284. The mysterious Chagatai. Everyone, spread out. Look for anything that might be a clue. Labor Most Glorious called the other players to search together. A dozen avatars fanned out around the jet bike, some launching drones. Footsteps, shouts, and the roar of machines echoed through the empty webway city. At first, everyone was eager. Who wouldn't want to find the man famed as the fastest in the Warhammer universe? But after a while, the momentum faded. It was as if the transport ship had appeared from nowhere. No obvious owner, no identification. He probably left the jet bike behind when he passed through, someone guessed. Forget that. Let's loot this city first. Judging by its scale, there has to be good stuff here. The adventuring party redirected their attention to the lost webway city. Instrument readings showed it had been built at least 5 million years ago. 5 million years? Humans were still using stones then, right? Dream Hall Hermit said, squinting at the device in his hand. Using stones? You're being optimistic, Labor Most Glorious replied. Humans hadn't even shed all their fur yet. Does the spirit race think of humans the way we think of primitive fisherfolk? Another player wondered. Very likely. They combed the ruins and turned up many expected finds, rare gems, crystals, precious metals, and spirit bone materials, common enough in abandoned spirit race cities. They also found some blank soul stones, which were excellent loot. As long as Slaanesh existed, soul stones remained in demand. Soul stones were fashioned from psychic crystals called waystones. A spirit race who carried one could have their soul absorbed by the stone upon death, preventing Slaanesh from consuming them. Without one, they'd become a feast for Slaanesh, like the Dark Eldar. Soul stones could be returned to Ark Eldar and embedded into a spirit bone core to grow into larger stones. Connected through the spirit bone soul circuits, the deceased could travel those circuits and become part of the Ark Eldar's collective consciousness. With these soul stones, we've covered our trip, Dream Hall Hermit said, visibly excited. If they made it back, they could sell them to the Ark Eldar of Gomorrah for a tidy profit. He'd formed the adventure group to excavate ruins and loot the relics of ancient civilizations. Because he'd joined the game late and had no external support, the group was self-funded. Everything, from ammo and ships to power armor and supplies, had to be paid for. If they kept running at a loss, the guild would collapse after only a few runs. Profit mattered. As long as you don't court death, exploring ruins can't lose money, Labor Most Glorious said. Sheeling wants those relics, and the tech priests do too. We can sell to the spirit race or to collectors. Other players love that stuff. Just as they began celebrating their haul, a voice pinged on the comms. I found an entrance inside the temple. It was Thunderbolt Ranger LOL. Dream Hall Hermit and the others rushed to the coordinates. The temple was grand. Its main gate still bore a ceiling barrier that time had partially eroded, and the players walked in with ease. Inside was astonishing preservation. Little dust, countless statues of spirit race gods, and brilliant intact murals. These murals must show the origin of the spirit race, Labor Most Glorious said in wonder. The paintings, still vivid after millions of years, depicted a group of old ones, large-headed, slender, surrounded by light, shaping the spirit race gods. The gods begot offspring, the earliest tribes, and learned from the old ones how to build a civilization. The murals traced a civilization set on a path by its creators, growing into glory. Record this and throw it online for the Warhammer scholars, Dream Hall Hermit said. He wasn't really interested in ancient spirit race theology. He wanted relics. Stop staring at murals and come over here, Thunderbolt Ranger LOL urged. He led them to a vast, pitch-black cave mouth. Light beams reached in but vanished without hitting the bottom. It looked unnaturally deep. This might be a rift between Holy Terra and the Warp, one player suggested. What do you think's down there? Treasure, obviously. Let's go. Greed beat caution. They left a few players behind to guard the stockpile, then switched on flight and entered the abyss. As they went deeper, a strange sensation rose, an instinctive fear, as if approaching the end of the universe. Their power armor systems began to glitch. Time felt unmoored. The players felt their bodies and souls urging them to turn back. But fear made them reckless. They pushed their systems to the limit and plunged on until they crossed some kind of boundary. It was a surreal shift, like stepping outside everything. Then light returned. They emerged onto a cold plain under a sky of stars arranged in impossible patterns. "Where are we?" Dreamhall Hermit looked around, baffled. He'd expected a rift, not this. "The stars are wrong." Labor, most glorious, muttered, frowning. "They look like a picture, like we're standing in the void looking down on a planet." "Maybe we've left the game's geometry," a player named Love and Joker suggested. "Or we've slipped out of the main program. If we die here, will our data be lost?" Labor Most Glorious asked. The others stiffened. They'd only just reached level 10 and completed their first-class advancement. Losing data and starting over would be a disaster. If dying here could even corrupt their game slot, why risk it? "Calm down," Dreamhall Hermit said. "Hammer Zero L is supposed to be 100% realistic. Maybe this is an Easter egg the devs put in. The Warhammer universe has both rule gods and faith gods, plus tech beyond comprehension. Being thrown out of the universe could be an intentional thing." His words eased the group. They split up to explore the alien plane. It wasn't barren. Strange, spirit-bone structures and crystal formations dotted the landscape. Clearly, the Old Ones, or the spirit race, had constructed this place for some purpose. When they pushed further, a terrifying roar filled the air. Strange, twisted creatures, utterly alien to the logic of Holy Terra, poured out and attacked. The players cut them down and harvested peculiar crystals from their corpses. Tests showed the crystals contained a rule-warping power. Different from Tzeentch's etheric influence, a force humanity didn't yet understand. "These crystals have to be priceless," someone muttered. They pressed on and found a temple. Fighting through more of the creatures, the players made their way inside and found a human head-sized crystal whose power matched the others. They took it without hesitation. The temple's murals suggested the ruins dated to the late stages of the War in Heaven. Labor Most Glorious read them. The Old Ones commanded mysterious, potent technologies and many vassals, but still suffered crushing defeats at the hands of the Necron led by the Catan. The calm warp, corrupted by years of war, had bred void creatures. In desperation, the Old Ones opened a node outside the universe to collect void energy to try and turn the tide. It failed. Instead, it attracted void entities that poured into the Holy Terra universe. The Old Ones sealed them away, and later the Spirit Race built cities and temples to strengthen those seals. But as the Spirit Race empire headed toward collapse, maintenance failed and the seals broke. There was a dark passage inside the temple. The players activated their flight devices, navigated it, and returned to webway space. Immediately, they heard gunfire and screams. "Kill these damned humans. Skin them, bone them, make their lives worse than death." Dark Eldar. Dreamhall Hermit recognized the attackers. After Gomorrah was destroyed, Dark Eldar had splintered across the webway, raiding humans and Arc Eldar alike. "Fight!" Labor Most Glorious shouted. The players who'd been exploring rallied and charged. Most were only level 10 to 11 and could face a matching number of Dark Eldar, but the raiders outnumbered them by several times. The adventurers were soon driven back, nearly overwhelmed. Then a towering figure strode into the fray, a giant wielding a scimitar like an autumn wind clearing fallen leaves. In moments, the Dark Eldar were routed, screaming and scrambling away. The savior was Jagatai Khan, the Primarch the players had been searching for without luck. After the slaughter, Khan glanced at them and turned to leave. The players surged after him. A Primarch. The chance of recognition, rewards, or at least a legendary story. How could they let him go? "Khan, stop, come with us," Dreamhall Hermit called, stepping into the Khan's path. "The Imperium is in a dire state. We need you." "It is not yet time," Jagatai Khan answered and walked deeper into the webway. He melted into the rolling mist and vanished. The players searched the mist and found nothing. The Warhawk of Chagoris had appeared as suddenly as he had disappeared. "He left us? Let's go. We'll report back to the guide." With no other leads, the party gathered their spoils and left the lost webway city. They returned to Gomorrah to file their report and handed the void crystal over to Sealing for inspection. P.S. Another chapter. Thank you all for your support. Take the day off. Sorry, I couldn't make it back. I'm still out. My apologies. Don't wait up. Erebus, watch me plan. Watch me plan. Jagatai Khan has appeared in a lost city in the webway? He even ditched that jet bike with an AE-86 engine. He rescued them, but refuses to return to the Imperium, saying he has other things to do? Is he suspected of looking for a mate for the White Scars? Qin Yun scrolled through the players' reports, a growing line of black worry creasing his forehead. When it mattered most, the players were reliable, but in ordinary times they were undisciplined, irreverent, and fond of memes. A single report could contain so much nonsense. Maybe he should add a stand-up routine module in the next update? Still, the AE-86 joke did fit Jagatai Khan. Of the Emperor's sons, Khan loved speed above all. He modified the Gloriana-class battleship given to him into a high-speed raider, cutting out equipment to push velocity to the limit. His favored tactics were hit-and-run hunts at full throttle. He even charged into battle mounted on jet bikes, bringing a kind of feudal cavalry doctrine to interstellar warfare. In the Siege of Terra, Jagatai Khan and the White Scars repeatedly struck the traitors with lightning assaults. At the siege's darkest hour, Khan led raids against the Death Guard and exiled Mortarion, easing the pressure on the defenders. Khan had been present throughout Terra's battles, like Dorn and Sanguinius, but he didn't take part in the fight on the Vengeful Spirit. He died, his soul shattered. The Emperor spent enormous effort reassembling him. During the decisive battles, Khan was still unconscious, recovering. By the time he awoke, Sanguinius was dead, Horus had fallen, and the Emperor lay half dead. After the heresy, Khan led an expedition to rescue Imperial troops captured by the Dark Eldar. While pursuing them, he rushed into the webway and never returned. Humanity had no reliable means of exploring the webway for millennia, so there'd been no news of him until now. With the Imperium repairing and reopening the webway, more traffic meant more chance encounters. Jagatai Khan's name had resurfaced. "Report this to the other Primarchs," Qin Yun ordered. "And tell the White Scars," he added after a pause. "I'm sure they'll send people." Sealing nodded and moved to carry out the orders. "Master, the Adventure players also found a void crystal left by the Old Ones." She opened a data projection. A strange, softly glowing crystal hovered in the display, and panels of analysis unfolded alongside it. "Void crystal?" Qin Yun leaned in. The technical readouts made him raise an eyebrow. This crystal contained a kind of primordial energy, an energy capable of reshaping both Holy Terra and the warp itself. If humanity could master it, the implications were staggering. The galaxy could be reshaped, and the balance of war rewritten. Analysis suggests void power may be the fundamental energy that constitutes this universe, Sheeling said. The Old Ones probably planned to use it to remold the galaxy and blunt the Citan. The hypothesis fit. In the late war in heaven, the Old Ones had been overwhelmed. The Satan's ferocity and the warp's entropic chaos had brought internal and external collapse. Qin Yun nodded. "Should we start researching it?" "Of course," Sheeling replied. "The Old Ones would have treated this as a weapon. We need tools against the Chaos Gods. If we learn to use it, perhaps we can control the warp, or even reshape the galaxy." "List the Void Crystal as a top priority research project," Qin Yun ordered. Sheeling added it to the to-do list and opened yet another projection. "This is the 13th closed beta batch of players," she said. "Please review. If there are no objections, I'll issue slots." Qin Yun skimmed the IDs. "Sigismund, please call me the loyal Shadowmoon Wolves. Flame Legion reporting for duty. Long live Tawiz. Emperor. Loyal Orange." He blinked. After Batch 8 had been dominated by Khorne devotees, Batch 13 looked like a parade of Emperor's men. "Is the selection random?" he asked. Sheeling explained the algorithm. The longer a person queued, the higher their weight. These were long waiters. "Any issues? Want to rescreen?" Qin Yun waved it away. Better to leave it. He hadn't intervened during the 8th batch and didn't want to be seen as meddling now. Let the players be who they were. "By the way, how's the Coronis Expanse?" he asked. "Many player teams have gone there," Sheeling said. "Someone discovered Erebus is in the Expanse. The players have started an event to find him." She brought up regional chat logs. Scores of teams entering the Coronis, hunting for the traitor who had torched the Horus heresy from the inside. "We don't want the credits. We just want Erebus dead." Capture Erebus alive at all costs. If Erebus doesn't die, we'll sacrifice the ops team. Ceiling grinned. Shall I issue a quest? Capture Erebus alive. Heavy reward. Qin Yun decided to fan the flames. Erebus couldn't be allowed to roam free. He had orchestrated some of the most heinous betrayals of the heresy, the murder of a Primarch's mother, the deaths of Loken, Argel-Tal, and Narek. He had been the rot at the core. Even after Terra, he had slipped away and survived. Do it, Qin Yun said. Let the players hunt him. Within hours, the quest appeared across the Coronis. The reward was enormous. Catching Erebus alive would rank among the highest contribution payouts in the Coronis campaign. The result was immediate, a stampede. Xiao Yangtuo led a state church team through the breach and arrived at the bustling landing port, where ships came and went in a constant stream. The Coronis Development Act had drawn merchants as well as players. Rare crops and ancient artifacts moved through the port, and every trip promised profit. After restocking, they plunged into the expanse's depths. So did Longxia's 13th Legion, Damo's island warlords, and dozens of other groups. Battles sparked across the expanse. The orc warlord Lion's Tooth, who'd once ravaged the Calixis sector with his horde, thought to wash away old humiliations. He met players with proper gear, disciplined firepower, and little mercy, and his assault was shattered. Wherever players went, they crushed resistance. Non-imperial forces across the Coronis were stunned, surrender, or total annihilation. Destruction spread outward from the landing port as player firepower and tactics scoured the expanse. Up in the warp, the Chaos Gods watched and fretted. These players, the god-chosen avatars and their allies, were tearing the galaxy into a shape dangerously favorable to humanity. If every lesser race declined and the Imperium grew dominant, worship of the Emperor would spread and the gods' influence would be squeezed. They muttered among themselves, considering whether to cultivate a new, potent god chosen to resist these avatars of destruction. Aboard a chaos-ruined warship, Erebus walked into a hidden chamber. The room was small and circular, walls disappearing into shadow like the inside of a well. Whispers and hisses curled through the air. Darkness seemed to breathe. The only light came from a deep red glow cast by an 8-pointed star etched into the floor. It illuminated chains slick with blood, amulets humming with dark power, and cultists wrapped in rotting robes, kneeling, their bodies fused to the writhing flesh that had become part of the ship. "Reveal the will of the gods to me," Erebus said, his voice low and coiling with venom. The cultists obeyed. Their thin, pallid bodies shuddered as the living flesh consumed them, and the star's light projected visions, savage warriors treading paths of bone, burning worlds, cities drowned in night. Twisted creatures roared to empty heavens. Slaves and soldiers marched through flame, weapons raised, their faces numb. The images meant something, the vast powers of chaos and the figure of the corpse emperor, the emperor trapped between sanctity and decay. Erebus watched with barely concealed disgust. He hated fools. During the Battle of Terra, he'd foreseen the corpse emperor's fate. Two possible outcomes: ascend to godhood and turn on humanity, or defeat Horus and consign the galaxy to a slow, suffocating death. The Emperor had chosen the latter, and Erebus had once been proud. His schemes had been instrumental to the heresy and to the chaos that followed. But now the game had shifted. The Corpse Emperor had brought in an outsider, some higher-dimensional patron who had unleashed invulnerable God chosen into the universe. These new chosen could not be killed, could not be corrupted, and their fate threads lay outside the normal weave. Many of the old plans had failed. Erebus scowled as the feed locked onto the landing port. God chosen moved there in force. Their faces were blurred by higher-dimensional laws and the interference of the Corpse Emperor's patron. Their true forms were unreadable, their fates unmoored from this cosmos and only attached, strangely, to an outsider called the Saint. "How to corrupt them?" Erebus murmured. Traditional corruption, chaos taint, bargains, even blades, would not work. They were immune to the usual methods. Killing them simply returned them through resurrection mechanics beyond his control. He smiled then, a cold, patient thing. "If I cannot corrupt them with corruption, I will bribe them." Erebus began to plot a different route, seduction with benefits. The God-chosen were treated as expendable tools by the Imperium, sent on dangerous quests, buying their own gear, deprived of status. The Chaos Gods could offer everything the Emperor did not: raw power, riches, freedom to wreak havoc, and a place as nobility in a galaxy ruled by chaos. If the offer were tempting enough, some of the Chosen might accept. He had once turned Horus. Perhaps he could do the same on a grander scale. If a meaningful fraction of the God Chosen rebelled, it could spark upheaval on the order of the Horus heresy. Erebus watched the blurred images of the God Chosen at the landing port and allowed himself a thin, confident smile. Soon he would reach them, whisper offers under the red light, and set the stage for a rebellion that could sunder the Imperium again. P.S. Another chapter. Thank you for your support, brothers. 287. Erebus, you are such an idiot. The cleanup operation in the Coronis Expanse was in full swing, and the orcs were the first to bear the brunt. The orcs of the Expanse had forged something like an empire, with Longtooth Star as their capital. Ever since humanity established the Calixis sector and asserted control over its systems, the Coronis orcs had been a constant thorn, raiding human worlds. When the Great Rift opened, the harassment turned into full-scale war. In 108 M41, the Calixis sector's internal affairs passed a resolution to eliminate the orcs of the Coronis Expanse and sent a vanguard fleet to reconnoiter. The light cruiser Radamanthus found the orcs. Its starseer sent a final log before dying, cataloging the scale of the orc domains and the worlds they ruled. They were not scattered pirate bands, but an empire: planets, shipyards, mining worlds, whole swathes of space bound together by orc war and industry. The Navy planned to concentrate overwhelming force and crush that empire in one blow, but the Murtek War and then the Great Rift kept interrupting the preparations. As the rift expanded, the orc reach only grew, worrying the imperial administrators in the Expanse. The Coronis Expanse was not officially an imperial territory, but humans colonized many worlds there, so the Calixis sector maintained officials to tax and oversee them. When the God Chosen launched the Coronis Expansion Act, those local officials gained mission authority and issued a writ in the Emperor's name to wipe out the Orc Empire. Player organizations answered the call. Combat Roses, the 13th Legion, the Sea Island Warlords, and others massed their forces and descended on Orc-held worlds. Combat Roses was assigned Skullcrusher Star, an important warp node world that opened access to many Orc-held systems. If taken, it would delay Orc mustering across nearby worlds by over 3 days. Skullcrusher Star was a harsh, sun-scorched world, enormous heat baking a barren surface, water scarce. No native life persisted there except in dark pockets of orc flora and fauna, the only ecosystems the orcs had made for themselves. The planet's sole settlement on the surface was Skulltown, clinging to the walls of a long, deep canyon. The lower levels were a chaotic sprawl of scrap heaps, mines and landfills tended by hordes of Gretchen recycling anything usable, fungi and squigs, reclaimed minerals. Above them sat crude mechboys' workshops, where orc craft sometimes landed to trade for rare ore. Surrounding the planet was a dense asteroid belt hollowed into habitats. The orcs carved caverns in meteors, planting strange biosystems inside to sustain themselves. Xiaoyang Tuo led Combat Rose's players in the assault. Their fleet hammered orc cruisers in the void. Patched, cobbled ships became fireworks as lance beams tore them apart, burning wrecks tumbling in all directions. The orc chieftain stationed on Skullcrusher Star died in that naval slaughter. The remaining fleet collapsed and was finished off. Then the landing. Players dropped onto the asteroids as vanguard, clearing orc nests. Under salvos of gunfire and screams of battle, one asteroid after another fell. The roaring orcs were mowed down by brutal, disciplined firepower. When the last orc died, Xiaoyang Tuo took off her helmet and breathed in the thin, bitter air, the tang of blood cold on her lips. Beneath her boot lay the corpse of a massive orc, skin like old, petrified bark, twin red eyes frozen in a last savage glare, a jutting lower jaw fixed in death. A dark pool of entrails confirmed the victory had been hard won. The installations around them spoke of years of occupation, control rooms and corridors slick with pulsing fungi, crude tribal totems, and armor piled into bizarre altars beside control consoles. A transparent dome framed the void beyond the station like an obscene window. An orc den certainly has a smell, Yuzi Zhang said as she strode in, her ornate armor streaked with orc blood. The blessed longsword in her hand crackled with arc lightning. Finally finished. Greybauer followed close, smirking. Honestly, orcs are ugly, but other Xenos, worse. Slimy, disgusting. I still feel sick thinking about that last extermination. Mengju grinned and nodded. Xiaoyang Tuo looked her companions over. Enough gossip. There's still an orc town on the surface we need to clear. Are we still airdropping? Mengju asked. No, Xiaoyang Tuo said. Tell the fleet to do an orbital broadside. No need to risk boots on the ground. Mengju sent the message. The fleet slid into position and unleashed volleys of lance fire. Skull Town was vaporized in a rain of beams. Combat roses left a contingent of Imperial troops to clean up the asteroid belt and begin mining. Under the Expansion Act, whoever liberated a planet claimed ownership and its wealth. Skullcrusher Star was now Combat Rose's private holding. It needed to be developed and kept. But Skullcrusher had been only an interlude. Players struck from every direction, ripping whole orc worlds from the Empire's grasp. The 13th Legion, led by Long Xia, targeted a treacherous mineral world cloaked in choking sulfur mists. It was geologically unstable and virtually uninhabited aside from orc mining operations. Shuttle loads of orc boys shoveled metal and lava for the mech boys to refine into arms, food, and water. The Legion took it easily. Long Xia's force was the largest of the first echelon. His popularity as a blogger drew flocks of undecided players, until the 13th became a massive melting pot of recruits. Meanwhile, the Sea Island warlords plundered Trampling Star, the orcs' main religious shrine and industrial complex. After a pitched battle, the orcs were crushed and Trampling Star thoroughly looted. Don't be shy. Take everything you can see, Damo ordered as his crews ransacked the place. Once looted, Damo intended to warp to Longtooth Star with his companions and strike at the orc capital. Longtooth Star was the Orc Empire's heart, a world raised of its natives, its industries repurposed by orcs into a fever of weapons production, workshops, and shipyards. War and manufacturing had devoured the planet's surface. Only testing grounds and gladiatorial pits remained as open space. Orbit was choked with stations and weapon platforms. Derelict giants like the Fist of Gork hung idle, ready to be thrown down upon an enemy. Everyone agreed Longtooth Star would be the rage-filled, brutal climax of the campaign. As Damo marshaled his fleet to warp out of Trampling Star, several warships emblazoned with chaos sigils cut their path. "They're chaos," a lookout hissed. "Open fire. Don't let them escape," Damo snapped. Merit points and loot were always worth taking, but a voice blared from the halyards, cold and formal. "God chosen, hear me before you open fire." "Open fire," Damo barked again. "No time for speeches. Kill the heretics." Erebus's voice came over the comm, thin and composed. "I am Erebus, and I speak for the gods." The name stopped Damo cold. Capturing Erebus alive would be worth more than any scrap of ore. He was the most notorious figure on the field. "Hold fire," Damo ordered. If they could bag Erebus intact, the admission fees and prestige would make them rich. Erebus's mouth lifted at that. See? Prestige mattered. Even the god chosen showed respect. "Erebus, I've heard of you," Damo called warmly. "Come over for a chat." Erebus was cautious. "I am a heretic. Invite me aboard, and aren't you afraid of the Corpse Emperor's zealous followers? Or is this a trick?" Damo's tone dropped into faux sincere outrage. "The Corpse Emperor is despicable, shameless, enslaving humanity. My heart bleeds for the people. Today I meet an apostle of the gods. If you are willing, introduce me to the gods and show humanity a clear path." Players near Damo snorted. The word Corpse Emperor was blasphemy by the book, and Erebus was taken aback. He had assumed the god chosen were loyal imperialists. If they held such grudge, they were ripe for conversion. "You harbor hatred for the Corpse Emperor?" Erebus asked, probing. "The false emperor deceives humanity and robs the gods. He must die." Damo roared, then gestured, and the cry went up among his players. "Slay the false emperor, a new era for humanity." Erebus's pupils dilated. Heresy offered like bait was irresistible. After a beat of hesitation, he agreed. Absurd, but too promising. He led a squad of demon-possessed word-bearers in a transport to the god-chosen flagship. The hangar doors closed around them. The deactivated cannon arrays clicked online, relocking on the word-bearer's craft. "What is the meaning of this?" Erebus frowned as the formation shifted. Daemon-possessed warriors around him rushed weapons to bear. "Of course it's a trap, you fool. Come aboard and we'll take you," a player joked. "Erebus, even with wings you wouldn't fly today." You threaten to turn away from the corpse emperor and embrace the gods? Erebus regarded Damo, voice flat. Wang Laohan may have been no saint, but at least he had consistency. The gods you praise are worse. Damo's longsword hummed to life, rending fields dancing along the blade. I was wondering where to find you, and you, fool, came right to my doorstep. Whether to call you stupid or arrogant, I don't know. Erebus threw his voice out to the assembled god-chosen. Much of what you think of as slanders from the Imperium are lies about the gods. Embrace the gods and the galaxy is yours. Wealth, power, status, strength, everything will follow. Players laughed at the promises, scornful. It grated on Erebus. He'd offered tempting terms and they laughed. Damo's smile was cruel. We're not fools, Erebus. Wipe you out, and this universe stays ours. Handing back what should already belong to us and expecting gratitude. Are you joking? Erebus seethed. These players were arrogant, greedy. How dare they claim what should belong to them? He and the gods were the true natives of the universe. These chosen were high-dimensional interlopers, outsiders. It was infuriating. The hangar's atmosphere tautened into standoff. Swords hummed, weapons primed. The trap had been sprung. What would be victory for one side would be ruin for the other. Both believed themselves righteous. Another chapter. Thank you all for your support. 288. The desert's unsatisfactory feelings. You are as arrogant as the corpse emperor. So arrogant it's shocking. So arrogant there's no comparison. Erebus stared at the god chosen before him. Don't praise us like that. It's embarrassing, Damo said with a shy smile. Erebus and the enchanted warriors felt the words like a knife, so furious they almost spat blood. Do these people not know a compliment from an insult? Are arrogance and haughtiness things to be proud of? One day you will regret this. No one can overcome the will of the gods, not even you who come from a higher dimension. The gods are the true masters of this universe. Erebus's voice dropped low. He made one last appeal, trying to sway them back into the gods' camp with word and rhetoric. His effort was doomed. Damo wore a mocking expression and spoke, word by word. No existence can resist the fourth calamity, not even a god. The ultimate masters of this universe are us, and only us. Go, deal with those enchanted warriors at all costs, and Erebus must be taken alive. Absolutely do not let him die. Kill, for the Emperor, for the Blood God. A World Eaters player raised a crimson axe and roared. Erebus felt Khorne's blessing descend onto the opponent's weapon. Not only Khorne, blessings from the Chaos Gods like the Lord of Change, the Prince of Pleasure, and the Plague God flared across other god-chosen weapons. Whenever a god-chosen called a Chaos God's name, their weapon took on that god's favor. What the hell is this? Have the Chaos Gods defected? For a moment, Erebus wondered if the gods had abandoned him. Even for traitors, gaining a god's blessing is normally a grueling trial. These god-chosen only needed to shout a name and the power came, and they were all supposedly loyal to the Corpse Emperor. This looked like the Chaos Gods were aiding the enemy. We're about to fight to the death. Why has your majesty surrendered first? Clang, clang, cold steel and brutal close-quarters combat rang out. Master, we can't stop them, Coral Badar shouted. Enchanted warriors are the most vicious, most loyal, and most dangerous soldiers. Terminators aglow with terrifying red light, their combat power unimaginable to ordinary men. The first of them were born before Horus's betrayal. The most famous was Angar Tai, who led a pilgrimage into the Eye of Terror and brought the god's will to Lorgar. He was the earliest to meet chaos and the first to be possessed by a daemon, yet through sheer force of will he bound the daemon Raum to himself and maintained control. Angartai could switch between human and demonic forms at will and was Lorgar's ideal of humanity, coexisting with chaos. He became Lorgar's adopted son and, prophecy said, would be slain by Sanguinius during the Battle of Terra. Erebus had used his actions to show prophecy could be challenged if one fought for a different future. During Angron's demon ascension rite on Nuceria, Erebus seized the chance and killed Angar-Tai. Lorgar was furious. Karn, learning of it, swore he would kill Erebus. When Karn later challenged him to single combat, Erebus fled by opening a warp gate, becoming a byword for cowardice. Enchanted warriors embody absolute loyalty to chaos. They bind with warp entities by offering their flesh. The mortal host gains power. The daemon gains a body that can manifest outside the warp. Over 10,000 years, these hybrid fighters have been nightmares for the Empire. But with the rise of the Primaris Space Marines, their old dominance has waned. Fire erupted. Artillery and Gatling batteries raked the word-bearers, suppressing the traitors so thoroughly many could not even fight back. The enchanted warriors, pushed to the limit, activated their demon-possessed states. With inhuman screams and a flash of red light, their bodies morphed, claws capable of piercing ceramite and steel, grotesque extra limbs, tentacles, wings, mouths, and eyes. Their strength and speed ballooned. They could heave vehicles and machinery and fling them like toys. The players were no slouches either. Years of combat hardened them into elite veterans. Superior tech, combat buffs, and the Emperor's blessings made them fearsome opponents. The two cohorts collided in brutal parity, both sides employing strange, devastating abilities. "Today all of you will die," Demo shouted, joining two other players against an enchanted warrior crowned with ox-like horns. The brute was massively built, its two blood-red eyes burning with malice. Still, the three players drove it back, knocking it down, pinning it to the deck. "You will all be cursed by the gods," the enchanted warrior spat, glaring hatefully at Damo and his companions. "I'll be waiting for you in hell." "Hell! This place is hell already, you fool!" Damo's sword swept, and the enchanted warrior's head came off. The demon was hurled back into the warp. The word-bearer's body died without its head. Some enchanted warriors slew players, but sheer numbers overwhelmed them. One by one they fell. The demons fled, dragging their shame back into the warp and snatching at the souls of dead word-bearers like petty snacks. "You'll regret this," Erebus shouted again from the bridge, fury in his voice as his forces collapsed. "Perhaps, but you won't live to see it. From this day forward, you will know despair, and even your gods cannot save you. Because the fourth calamity is invincible. The fourth calamity is destined to rule this universe. Gods, and all, will kneel at our feet." Damo swaggered forward, sword flashing as he strode toward Erebus. It was intoxicating, especially against such a notorious NPC. The feeling of trampling everything the NPC revered was perverse joy, like making an ineffectual husband watch his wife taken with no recourse. Erebus, however, was sly. He drew a dagger and, with a casual cut, rent a rift of eerie light open. He and a few guards slipped through. By the time Damo reached the spot, the rift had vanished, leaving only an empty deck. The remaining enchanted warriors were swiftly finished or captured. Erebus must have fled to his battleship. "Activate the warp jump immediately. Don't let him escape," Damo ordered. The players, abandoning corpse clearing, rushed to the teleportation hall to board and capture Erebus alive. The fleet hammered the word-bearer's battleship, trying to collapse its shields and warp fields. "Brothers, live stream the capture of Erebus," one player announced. At first, others thought them joking. Erebus wouldn't be that foolish. But as video and photos streamed in, silence fell. "Warmaster, is Erebus an idiot? Why didn't he come to me instead?" Shilang, so angry I'm shaking. I'm also in the Coronis Expanse. "Brothers, wait for my good news. When I bring Erebus back to Terra alive, I'll set up several tables to celebrate." The teleportation hall screamed with machinery. Light swallowed Demo and the players. Reality bent and then snapped back. They were inside the word-bearer's battleship. The interior was a black pit of dread. Steam hissed from pipes, thick incense mixed with sweat and rot. "Disgusting," a player muttered. "Worse than an orc den." They pushed deeper. Monsters and cultists fell to disciplined fire. Only a few word-bearer veterans slowed them, and even those were overwhelmed. Demo and his team reached the vessel's core, where Erebus stood conducting a chaos ritual with his oracle. Above the altar, a glowing vortex churned, clearly a warp portal capable of immediate jump. "No! Damn it! Erebus, stay and duel me!" Damo lunged, but too late. Erebus glanced at him, voice cold. "We will meet again soon. You will regret what you have done today." Then he stepped into the vortex and vanished. Players swung, killing the oracles and smashing the altar to pieces, but Erebus had gone. "No!" Damo fell to his knees, howling. Snowflakes flutter, the north wind whistles. Another player began to sing, a ridiculous and out-of-place ditty. Damo glared at the musician. The others shared the same hostile looks. "I thought some music would set the mood," the player mumbled, embarrassed. "Where are you from?" Damo demanded. "Binjiang." When we go offline, a few of you drag him to the island, throw him into the sea, and make him swim back, Demo grumbled. No, boss. I've served the organization. I've shed blood for the group. You can't do that to me, the musician protested, and the squad indulged in a little ribbing. The earlier despair faded. Erebus was the universe's greatest villain and the prime mover of the Horus Heresy. If he were easy to catch, Imperial heroes would have done it long ago. The players reminded themselves that Erebus surviving was hardly surprising. Damo posted the whole affair in the global chat. Others opened champagne in mock celebration. Those who hadn't joined the Coronis Expanse lamented their absence. Catching Erebus alive would have yielded obscene war points. Some suspected Damo of staging the whole event to claim Hammer L's operations for himself. But with Erebus gone, the chance reopened. Everyone perked up. Once the remaining Chaos ships were cleared and the rescued slaves accounted for, Damo led the fleet to Longtooth Star to wipe out the orcs in the Coronis Expanse. The fleet threaded through surging Tzeentchian turbulence, and several days later dropped into Longtooth space. The orcs had amassed an absurdly large force. The 3 remaining orc warlords in the Coronis Expanse had gathered there, both sides prepared for a massive battle. On the fringe of the conflict, an Eldar battleship hovered, keeping its distance. Several seers from the Coral Craft world watched the human armada assemble. As an ancient race, the Eldar could hardly miss such a deployment. Erebus escaped, but he's still in the Coronis Expanse. Ayla Ashbel, chief seer of the craft world, murmured to herself. These foolish monkeys might need some help. She intended to warn humanity and reveal Erebus's location. P.S. Another chapter. Thank you all for your support. I also recommend a similar novel, Warhammer 40k, Imperial Traitor. The synopsis is in the author's notes. When the human fleet continued to warp in and mass at the edge of the Longtooth system, the 3 orc warlords, Snagamone, Grabskaga, and Mogash Kulgraz, could no longer contain their bloodlust. They ordered a full-scale assault. Dozens of patched-up orc vessels, belching smoke, swarmed the human fleet, and a void battle erupted. The humans answered in kind. Missiles and lances stitched the vacuum into a deadly lattice. Warships danced a lethal ballet of maneuvers, trading devastating fire. The void filled with tracer lines, missile exhaust plumes, and the shattered carcasses of exploded vessels. Electromagnetic interference made instruments hiss and groan. Atomic impacts detonated between the fleets. Both sides took heavy losses. Orcs abhorred long-range duels, so mechboys built hulks surged in close and crude jump-pounched boarding parties. The players, human combatants hardened by countless wars and led by the 13th Legion, did not yield. They counterboarded the orc ships. Corridors became rivers of blood and metal as fights broke out in confined spaces. For the Emperor brothers, a bowl of lobster soup raised his arm and shouted. A chorus of players answered him. For Celia, for the city in the sky. For Chenduzi, for the Empress. Their roars echoed through the decks as they massed on the embarkation ramps. Teleportation locks were unreliable in the maelstrom, so boarding torpedoes were the fastest way in. The players sealed themselves into melta-tip projectiles and fired through the barrage. The torpedoes burned through orc hulls and punched into the enemy ships. A bowl of lobster soup burst onto the orc vessel and heard the distant, joyful bellow of greenskins. A cluster of orcs rounded a corridor bend, rusty armor, straps, and bolts holding crude prosthetics in place. Fire, he screamed. Bolt guns answered, a leaden rain that shredded the orc advance into a bloody smear. The players surged, chainswords and blades flashing. A massive orc with mechanized muscles and a crackling war choppa smashed through several players like a battering ram. The behemoth was Snagamane, lord of the Starfort they were boarding. A bowl of lobster soup met him blade to axe. The clang of power swords on crude metal sent shockwaves through the corridor. They traded brutal blows until an opening appeared. With a low, angling cut, he felled Snagamane's legs, then stepped in and crushed the monster's skull beneath his boot. The 13th Legion fought forward, alien gore splattering their armor. With the hiss of power blades and the thunder of bolters, they cut a path to the ship's core and bridge. Teams planted charges at reactors, shield generators, and command centers, then withdrew. Once at a safe distance, the explosions tore ships apart, and these tactics slowly swung the battle in the Imperium's favor. Just as the human armada began to press its advantage, a monstrous construct emerged before the Imperial commanders, a hollowed, mountainous planetary fortress. Its surface bristled with emplacements and orbital batteries. Engine nacelles the size of kilometers jutted from bedrock. The starfort's presence negated the human fleet's gains. Several Imperial ships vaporized under its gunfire. The Orc escort vessels, maddened by renewed hope, charged like rabid brutes into the human lines. Xiao Yangtuo ordered concentrated fire and forced a shield breach. Teleportation locks acquired the starfort's surface, and high-level Rose Chapter players stepped through in a flash. Orcs guarding generators stared in unbelief for a heartbeat, then roared. The players cut through them, moving in small, coordinated teams toward the core. The enemy's approaching. Move fast. Plant charges on the energy nodes and bring this thing down, Xiao Yangtuo barked. They had to cripple the starfort to let the fleet dominate the void. They charged through fortifications with war cries. Charge! Don't be cowards! Huang Lao Han is watching us. Explosions shook the ground as trench after trench fell in seconds. In moments, the first defenses lay in ruins. In minutes, beacon fires spat black smoke into the sky. The players ran like a blade, slaughtering orcs and tearing the bastion apart. Then Snagamone himself strode out, 5 meters tall, massive, a walking wreck of industrial prosthetics. The magnitude of him made even Grey Bower, chainsword in hand, gape. Meng Zhu unleashed roaring warp energy. Lightning tore through orcs nearby and left the air reeking of burnt fungus. Xiao Yu, lunging with a crackling power sword, was thrown back hard enough to dent the earth, saved only by her mech and her faith-based recovery. Xiao Yangtuo slashed and opened her pet space to disgorge several Bug Saint units. Shackled to her will by implanted controllers, they tore through nearby orcs with enormous, slicing limbs. Protect me, Xiao Yangtuo intoned, and a holy radiance bathed her. Snagamane charged, cleaving with a giant choppa. Metal rang. The two clashed, size and brutality matched by the human's faith-empowered endurance. Other players unleashed Zerg units bought from the MC dynasty to pin orcs down while they struck at the warlord. Meng Zhu raised his scepter. Raging thunder, he cried. Warp energy lightning struck Snagamane, scorching him and making him stagger. Players swarmed, hacking vicious gouges into his flesh and machine. Seizing the moment, Xiao Yangtuo drove her sword through the warlord's neck. His head tumbled free. With it went the orc's will to fight. Masked greenskins broke and fled, cut down by the landed Imperials. When the slaughter ended, the starfort's surface was a carpet of corpses and rivers of blood. They pressed inward, planting charges on the plasma fusion core. When the bombs detonated, the core ruptured in a blinding blast that tore the starfort into fragments. Deprived of their bulwark, the orc fleet collapsed. Hulks detonated in the void like supernova, and the patched, bloated warships burned and fell away. The Imperial fleet finished the rout. With the void cleared, players mounted an orbital assault on Longtooth. Drop pods screamed through the sky and slammed into the ground, cratering the surface. The players spearheaded the assault, cutting through orc defenses like a hot blade. Fortifications fell in half an hour of relentless slaughter. Fields of dismembered limbs marked their path. Mogash Kulgraz, the last of the major warlords, led his personal guard against the invaders. The battle to kill him cost the players dearly. Dozens fell, but Damo and his comrades finally felled him. All 3 warlords lay dead. The orcs on Longtooth fragmented and could not consolidate under a new leader. The players swept the world until no organized threat remained. After the fighting, Adeptus Mechanicus priests moved in to retake the planet. Flamethrowers cleansed the soil of spores, ruins were smashed, and human infrastructure rose where orc hovels had stood. As the players counted their spoils, Eldar seers led by Ashbel appeared. "Do you want to know Erebus's whereabouts?" he offered. The players had been indifferent to Eldar aid before. Alliances with the Eldari were practical rather than friendly, but the name Erebus sharpened their attention. His escape had been one of Damo's greatest regrets. Ashbel supplied coordinates and offered to open a webway gate for them. Speed mattered. Only the webway could get them to a fleeing Chaos agent in time. Ashbel expected deferential gratitude in return for such a favor, but Damo, Xiao Yangtuo, a bowl of lobster soup, and the others treated him as an ordinary ally. He chafed at their casual airs and vowed in private never to open a webway for such human monkeys if their attitudes did not change. Then, when they arrived in the starfield where the webway portal should lie, Ashbel and his retinue were stunned. A human warship at the fleet's vanguard calmly and expertly opened the webway gate and slipped through without Eldar guidance. Ashbel's certainty ruptured. If Eldar alone could wield the webway easily, how had these humans done it? The sight shook the seer to his core. 290, capture Erebus. How did you do it? Ashbel asked Damo, her face tight with shock as she opened the comlink. Of course your spirit race taught us, Damo replied, a trace of surprise in his voice. He found it hard to believe that the great prophetess would be asking such a question. With Sealing's help, the Imperium had long since mastered the technique of opening webway entrances. Later, Eldrad and other spirit race prophets had shared more webway technology. Now the Imperium of Man could not only open the webway, but also repair it. We taught you? How is that possible? Ashbel snapped, refusing to accept the explanation. Eldrad and the other spirit race taught us the relevant techniques years ago. Opening a webway gate is nothing special. We can even repair breaches. Damo's voice was steady. In a few days, the webway you once damaged will be repaired by us, Damo added, then realized the problem. Communication between the Ark worlds was not seamless. The great prophetess of the Colunus Ark world had been isolated and knew nothing of the new alliances. She was unaware that the players, the Death Guard, and other spirit race factions had reached a permanent cooperative agreement with the Imperium. Colunus was remote, with little contact with the mainstream Ark worlds. So much of what was happening elsewhere had not reached her. Usve Ark world? They taught you webway technology? Ashbel's tone hardened. How could they do such a thing? At the name Eldrad, anger and incredulity flared. Other Ark Eldar had not only taught humans how to open the webway, but how to repair breaches as well. If humans mastered the webway completely, whose would it be, humanity's or the spirit races? The spirit race empire had crumbled. Their power had never been lower. Webway mastery was their foundation and last reliance. Teaching it to humanity felt like inviting catastrophe. To Ashbel, the Usve prophets looked like traitors who had committed the ultimate betrayal of their people. If humans later waged war and drove the spirit race to extinction, the Usve prophets would be to blame. By the way, Damo continued casually, your laughing god has reached an agreement with the Imperium too. He's promised to increase support for humanity and let them fully master the webway. If a joint force ever faces the Chaos Gods, they could even have access to knowledge from the Black Library left by the Old Ones. Those last words stunned Ashbel. Cyrog, the laughing god, had actually made terms with humanity. Not only would he share webway technology, he would open the Black Library. The Old Ones had been the creators of the spirit race, the architects of their civilization and pantheon. The Black Library contained their wisdom, a crystallization of knowledge so vast a civilization that could obtain and digest it would instantly ascend to a top-tier position. In the spirit race's history, only a handful had access to that library. For Cyrog, guardian of the Black Library, to agree to share it with humans was unfathomable. What did he see in them? Why offer so much? If Cyrog had made that pact, the Usve Ark world were not traitors but visionaries. They had taken a first step toward mutual benefit. If humans could help the spirit race defeat the Dark Prince, Eldrad and his allies would become heroes. A flicker of jealousy and grudging admiration rose within Ashbel. Those elders had foreseen a path she had not. Damo watched Ashbel's projection fall into contemplation and did not press the point. He had no idea how many conflicting emotions could be provoked in such a short time by this news. If he had, he might have sighed. No wonder they say the Eldar's emotions are more sensitive than humans. They experience far more from the same stimuli, he thought. A race capable of nurturing Slaanesh is not to be underestimated. Those intense, volatile emotions were the spirit race's talent and their weakness. They amplified psychic power, but every small thing echoed far more loudly in the warp for them than for other races. In the Empire's decline, gladiatorial spectacles, assassinations, and conspiracies proliferated because they provided more sensory stimulation. If an ordinary human gained 1 unit of pleasure from an act, A spirit race member would gain 10 fundamental differences in perception and motivation. Once Ashbel understood why humans had gained webway mastery, she fell silent. She closed the link and ordered her spirit-bone battleship to shadow the human fleet. She intended to deal with Erebus first, then visit the Usvej Ark world to learn the full truth and their motives. With other spirit race prophets, she planned to watch the threads of fate unfold. Even ignoring the new alliances, she had not shared the information out of pure generosity. Erebus threatened Colunus directly. For years, Ashbel had been haunted by prophetic visions. Erebus leading chaos warriors and daemons to the Colunus Ark world, stealing its soul stones, enslaving the dead. She had to change that fate. This time, however, Ashbel saw nothing. The future had gone hazy and empty, as if some horrific force had torn the tapestry of fate, plunging events into chaos and making prophecy impossible. She tried repeatedly and found nothing. Everything has fallen into the unknown, she thought bitterly. Frustration left her no choice but to place hope in the human players. Now I can only hope these monkeys can eliminate Erebus. The fleet threaded the webway. They encountered a few daemons en route, but those creatures caused no trouble and were swiftly banished back to the warp by the players. The players' combat power had grown. Ordinary daemons could no longer threaten high-level players. Exiting the webway, the human warships set course for the Saronis system, the location Ashbel had indicated. Erebus and his allies were hiding there. Saronis was a world under chaos influence, a hub where traitors and opportunists from the Coronis expanse exchanged arms and favors. The Dark Mechanicum treated it as an important market. With enough coin, one could purchase standard Imperial weapons, ammo, demon engines, and daemon servitors from Forge worlds. The man who controlled it was Caligos, a figure said to be blessed by the gods, though the Imperium would call him a hunted psyker. Caligos had been an Imperial citizen from Calixis, whose life had been ordinary until the night he awoke to psychic power. He screamed and unleashed a wave of mental energy that wiped out billions, 26 billion dead across 26 worlds in the first impact, and over 60 billion casualties overall, devastation that left those worlds paralyzed. The Inquisition marked him for elimination and sent commando teams. But Caligos, aided by dark wizards and chaos blessings, mastered his power and signed a pact with a daemon. He slew the commando squads, took a ship, slipped into the Coronis expanse, and in 10 years rose to become the ruler of Saronis. From an outsider's perspective, his rise was legendary. "We need to stabilize this system. First blockade the star system," Damo said on the comms. "I support that. Erebus is too cunning," Xiao Yang Tuo replied. "I support it too. We can't let this rotten seed escape like Damo did," said a voice named a bowl of lobster soup. Damo bristled. The dignified leader of the island had become an object of ridicule. He would not tolerate it. This time they had to capture Erebus alive. He did not boast. He wanted to erase the shame he felt. With consensus reached, the brought-along dimensional controllers were activated. Saronis was enveloped in a constructed dimensional space, severed from Holy Terra's surrounding spacetime and peeled away from normal continuity. Even artifacts capable of cutting through standard spacetime could not escape. On Saronis' surface, Erebus sensed the spatial distortion immediately. He drew a line in the air with his dagger and opened a glowing rift. But the rift was not a warp gate, nor a passage to familiar worlds. Strange roars echoed from within it, and heavy footsteps suggested something on the other side had noticed the opening and came to investigate. "These outsiders truly have many tricks," Erebus muttered. Erebus had not wasted the last 10,000 years. He had delved deeply into theology, galactic and cosmic, seeking the universe's secrets. The galaxy was vast but tiny compared to the cosmos. If chaos gods existed here, might there be greater powers beyond? He'd explored ruins of ancient civilizations and traded with mysterious organizations. He had learned of outer gods, older, more powerful beings whose apostles sometimes walked the galaxy, observing the evolution of races and gods. Those outer gods never required faith and rarely interfered. They merely watched. Erebus had no way to contact them. They were indifferent. What he had opened with his dagger were kin of those outer gods, entities impossible to reason with terrifying assimilative powers. Even daemons would go mad and twist toward their likeness if they approached. The rift collapsed, and Erebus withdrew his gaze. With his retreat blocked, he resolved to go all in. "Come down," he said to the skies. "Let us see whether higher dimensional power is stronger, or the might of the gods more terrible. I will baptize you with a chaos ritual wrought on the sacrifice of hundreds of millions. I refuse to believe that after such power enters you, you will remain unchanged." He whispered the oath to himself. Betting everything on this confrontation, he would corrupt these outsiders and make them slaves of the gods. The hatred between the Imperium and the Chaos Traders, he believed, could only be cleansed with blood. As the players arrived in the Seronis system, void combat erupted. The Chaos Traders' fleet was no match. A few exchanges of fire, and they were annihilated. The Imperium achieved an overwhelming victory in space. It seems the void battle was only the prelude. "The real test will be on the ground," Demo said, frowning as he watched the ground surveillance feed. "P.S. Another chapter. Thank you for your support." A holographic projection hovered above the control panel in the strategic room, casting a rotating image of the planet's surface. A vast, jagged crater ringed by mountains, and at its center, a magnificent temple. The scan had flagged that temple as the largest structure on the world. Its dominant position made its importance obvious. Around the console, more than a dozen other holograms of senior officers and advisors debated the coming operation. "The psychic index on this place has gone off the charts," Xiaoyang Tuo said. "I smell chaos." "Seronis has completed the blood sacrifice," another voice reported. "This world has already been folded into the warp." As great prophet of Koror Arc World, Ashbel had the right to sit in on the council. She offered her counsel nonetheless. "Why not just glass it from orbit?" Lobster Soup suggested. "The dimensional space is sealed anyway. Erebus can't break out." "It's not that simple," Ashbel replied. "Even if the pocket is sealed, orbital bombardment won't kill Erebus. The word-bearer's centuries of atrocities have given him terrible blessings," she went on. "Ordinary weapons won't finish him." The room fell quiet. "Start with a heavy orbital strike to soften them up, then land," Xiaoyang Tuo said. "That's how we always do it." "I agree," Damo nodded. "Erebus is cunning, caution is prudent." They all consented, and orders for orbital bombardment were broadcast to the fleet. Dense missile volleys, torpedoes, and lance strikes hammered Seronis world. When the first fusion warhead impacted, a tower of fire ripped outward, swallowing buildings. Towers collapsed, mountains fractured, rivers boiled. The surface was scorched into a wasteland. Explosions layered on explosions until, to every observer's astonishment, ruins healed themselves, stone and flesh knitting back together as if nothing had happened. An uncanny aura settled over the land, a chill that felt like a dark, living wound. "Some kind of resurrection sorcery," Lobster Soup muttered, rubbing his temple. "It ruins and then restores itself." "Damn it, Hammer Zerel's ops never disappoint. They can adapt to anything," Demo said with a bitter laugh. "Let's airdrop. Erebus has no doubt prepared for both outcomes." "If they want resurrection, we'll show them what a real natural disaster looks like," Xiaoyang Tuo said, strapping on her jump pack. Transports and fighter escorts dropped out of orbit and dove for the surface. Tall, flesh-sheathed spires on the ground fired white beams into the sky. When hit, they crumbled to dust. From high altitude, the players jumped to minimize transport losses. Xiaoyang Tuo ignited her pack and dove like a meteor. The others followed in a streak of flame. They struck hard, impact craters blooming beneath them with thunderous concussions. They hit the ground and opened fire. Damo cut down several multi-limbed, many-eyed cultists in an instant. The defenders were horribly mutated by chaos, grotesque and savage. After clearing the landing zone, Damo led a squad toward the central temple. The roads were lined with weird structures, covered in chaos runes and crawling with writhing flesh and eye sockets. The air stank of rot and a low keening. Warp things skulked beyond sight. Bodies hung everywhere, nailed to inverted crosses, impaled on spikes, hooked and dismembered, each face frozen in terror. "This is worse than any haunted house," Xiaoyang Tuo said over comms, bursting into the temple from another approach. "Ha ha! Afraid?" Lobster Soup taunted. "Want to scream for us?" Demo's voice was scornful. "Look at the double-headed eagles on our shoulders. Are we supposed to flinch?" "Even if a ghost knocks, I'll punch it into paste," another replied. Among the players there were many powerful psychers, Even incorporeal horrors could be driven off. The temple approach was defended by cultists, chaos space marines, warp daemons, and abominations that would be boss material in any nightmare. Still, on this battlefield, they were meat. The inscriptions of prayer on the player's armor flared with the Emperor's light. Their prayer scrolls burned with sanctified fire. Battle erupted. Blessed by their faith and the Emperor's shield, the players slaughtered through the traitors. Warp daemons and aberrations burned and were sent screaming back to the Immaterium. Protected by a high-dimensional mantle of the Emperor's power, the invaders could not withstand it. At the heart of the temple, the warp throbbed so thickly it felt like a second atmosphere. Erebus and Caligos waited there, Erebus with his cold, malignant stare, Caligos the twisted sorcerer at his side. "I've been waiting," Erebus told the surging squad, eyes glittering. "This time, I won't let you leave." Demo flicked a dimensional cube from his pocket and tossed it into the air. It bloomed, sealing the temple's interior. Even if Erebus tried to cut through reality with his ritual dagger, the cube would snare him. Forceful escape could fling him into unknown, perilous extra-dimensional places. "Escape?" Erebus sneered. "You should be the ones running." Caligos began to chant, and the temple responded. A globe of malignant energy rose from the altar, fed by the hatred and despair of hundreds of millions. Chaotic power flooded the players, power that should have twisted them into spawn. Instead, something they and Erebus had not expected occurred. The malefic energy, carrying billions anguish, struck the god chosen within the players and transmuted. Where despair and torment had been meant to corrupt, it became a blade of vengeance. The screams of the dead filled the players' ears, a chorus of suffering. Beneath the despair, though, rose another feeling, a furious hunger for retribution. The players' bodies thrummed with that new force, an undeniable appetite to punish the source of the suffering. Their combat ability spiked. That's strong," Xiaoyang Tuo said, a grim smile breaking across her face. "Did they just buff us as the fight starts?" Demo stared, baffled. Erebus's plans had backfired. What was meant to poison and subjugate them had instead made them more deadly. Erebus could not fathom it. These were supposed to fall. Warped by chaos, how had they absorbed the dead's curse and turned it into power? "Take Erebus down," Lobster Soup charged. Possessed cultists and chaos warriors poured from the shadows as demons shrieked. Caligos wove psychic storms, but the players, bristling with vengeful power, cleaved through them like a scythe through chaff. Caligos watched his spells fizzle against an unexpected resilience and cursed his own rights. His portal opened in a desperate attempt to flee, but before he could vanish, a psychic bone blade burst through his chest. A Koror Arc World warrior seized the moment and ended the sorcerer in one strike. Erebus fared little better. Surrounded, he was battered and beaten, punched and kicked until his face was a mask of bruises. With a last, hoarse scream, he was finally sealed into the dimensional cube. Meanwhile, far away in the Eye of Terror, on a daemon world called Sikaris, the Word-Bearer's holy city burned with a different light. Temples and idol workshops clustered like teeth. Cultists chanted day and night. If Guilliman were shown this place, he would have seen a grotesque mockery of the perfect city. Statues that once honored the Emperor, now twisted into icons of chaos. At the center of that blasphemous metropolis stood the Sanctuary of Torment, the Word-Bearer's greatest temple, where Lorgar, their Primarch, made his abode. He no longer served a single god so much as the principle of chaos itself. Years of contemplation had taught him the depths and mechanics of the ruinous powers. In his meditations, he had drawn closer to something like godhood. When Erebus's cry of defeat echoed through the warp from Saronis, Lorgar opened his eyes. A scream, that of his son, had reached him. Though Lorgar no longer felt the simple paternal bond with Erebus, the web of fate and the will of the Chaos Gods required his intervention. He could not allow his son to be returned to Terra and to the Emperor's hands. Lorgar left the Sanctuary of Torment, an aureole of corrupt light clinging to him. As he stepped onto the temple platform, the Chaos Gods fixed their gaze upon him. He felt their blessings, but he met them not as a supplicant, but as an equal. He had come to understand them, and in that understanding he had gained perspective. To truly master chaos was not to be its slave, but to wield it as a tool toward your own ascension. If the Imperium were destroyed and the galaxy drowned in suffering, Lorgar believed he might rise to sweep away the boundaries that held him. "I will help," he said softly. "Chaos will triumph in the final reckoning." The Chaos Gods bestowed their power like a cold wind. Lorgar felt the ability to unmake and command as if he already held divine authority, powers with which a single Primarch could rend worlds. He thought of his brothers, of Horus, who had been a willing pawn, but also of others like Korax, and now of another target entirely. "First, Guilliman," Lorgar said, a smile like a scripture carved across his face. This brother was blessed with luck. He had a home on Macragge, foster parents to tend him. He intoned ancient formulas, and daemons with hideous faces and reverent posture appeared and knelt. "Go," he commanded. "Seek out the souls of Guilliman's adoptive parents. Bring them to me." The daemons dispersed on their errand. "Then we will settle everything with Robout Guilliman," Lorgar murmured. Though he wore the Chaos God's favor now, he knew he could not face the combined might of Lionel Johnson, Guilliman, and that outsider alone. He would need allies, his brothers. P.S. Another chapter. Thanks for the support, brothers. I've realized I've fallen into bad habits. If I start writing at 9, it's this time. If I start at 6, it's still like this. Erebus's despair breaking news. Erebus has been captured. Breaking news. Erebus has been captured. 2 identical alerts flooded the channel, dragging countless lurking players into the conversation. Warmaster, the galaxy's #1 villain has been captured? Shilling. Are you sure it's Erebus? That guy is clever. Fake. It has to be fake news. Yeah, sounds fake to me. The global chat exploded to 99+ messages. The name Erebus ignited heated debate across star systems. No one believed Damo, Xiaoyang Tuo, and the others could have taken him alive. Erebus's record during the Horus Heresy was infamous. He had killed the mother of a Primarch, Elda, the legendary first enchanted warrior Angertal, and Loken, who had witnessed the whole rebellion and the final duel between Horus and the Emperor. He had escaped death time and again, summoned greater demons as easily as drinking water. How could they possibly have captured him alive? Then photos and videos of Erebus confined in a stasis cube appeared. The chat fell eerily silent. After a long pause, messages began again. "Warmaster, no way? Did you really catch him? How did you even manage that?" Old Bird, terrifying. Faced with irrefutable proof, even skeptics had to concede. Erebus was indeed a prisoner of Damo and company. The conversation quickly shifted from disbelief to schemes for punishing him. Old 13, "Damo, interested in doing some business?" Old 13, "What's up, smarty?" "One-on-one, you bastard. Come fight me." "So, what business?" "I'll be reasonable this once. Want a partner to open a gladiatorial arena? We capture a bunch of traitors and chaos demons, lock them up, and let players fight them one by one. If they get crippled, we heal them, then they fight again. Each challenge costs money. Beat the easier ones to unlock tougher opponents. Erebus is the grand finale. Only players who've defeated all the others can challenge him. Promote it, and it'll be a hit. The money will roll in. Those players will love humiliating Erebus, right?" Warmaster. Old Bird. Typical of Tzeentch's favorites, malicious brilliance. "Erebus, my lord, the true devil. Kill, kill, kill. Too cruel." At Old 13, "Great idea, let's do it." They discussed the logistics and, with the Adeptus Mechanicus' infrastructure at their disposal, built a magnificent gladiatorial arena in 3 days. To draw a crowd, Damo and the others offered half-price admission on opening day. Players from across the galaxy poured to Saronis via the Lighthouse Teleport Network, eager to beat down the imprisoned traitors and demons. Warmaster, player combat power #1, cut through the opening lineup of foes and stepped up for the long-awaited challenge against Erebus. When the announcement sounded, the dimensional cube containing Erebus slid out of the dark tunnel and stopped. Time rewound for him as the stasis released, then snapped forward. The first thing he noticed was the roar of the crowd and the alien smell of the arena. "Where is this?" Erebus blinked. The armor etched with liturgies and prayers was gone. He wore only a loose linen tunic. A guard above the ring tossed a weapon down with a clang. "Pick up your weapon, traitor. The champion of the arena will challenge you." Erebus looked up. In the center of the pit stood a broad, bare-chested man, still mottled with blood, fresh from a brutal fight. He held a longsword and eyed Erebus coldly. "Erebus, pick up your weapon," the man said. "I can't wait to give you a good thrashing." Erebus understood at once. They'd turned him into spectacle. He was a chosen servant of the gods, a dark apostle wielding forbidden truths. How dare they make him a toy for entertainment? "You'll regret this," he vowed, and bent to take the sword thrown at him. It was sharp and heavy in his hand. Warmaster charged with blinding speed, closing distance in an instant. His longsword flashed, the first strike sang through the air. Erebus met the blow. Steel met steel in a shower of sparks that glittered against the dim arena lights. The collision flung vibration up Erebus's arm. The raw power behind his opponent's strikes was extraordinary. Clang, clang, the blows came like a storm, leaving after images as they crashed together. Erebus retreated repeatedly, his hand throbbing and blood beating where the strikes had gashed him. Another collision knocked Erebus's blade aside. Warmaster lunged, his other forearm smashing into Erebus's nose with brutal precision. Cartilage cracked as blood sprayed. Erebus cried out and stumbled back. The arena gasped. Warmaster pressed the advantage with a horizontal sweep that left a fearsome wound across the Dark Apostle's chest. The crowd of players and Imperial troops watched in stunned silence. They had known Warmaster was powerful, right, but now they finally grasped how overwhelming. Erebus was no novice. He had fought through the Great Crusade and the heresy, his seniority and experience rivaling the best. Yet in this duel, he was suppressed, unable to mount an effective counter. "Demo, Warmaster, is this guy cheating? That strength could take on 3 of us." "Lopstoop, no nickname can deceive. This guy truly lives up to being the guide's son. His power is ferocious." Warmaster paid no mind to the commentary. He focused on finishing it. Another barrage sent Erebus's sword clattering across the deck. A punch to the throat followed, then a booted strike to the belly that hurled him into the arena wall with a heavy thud. Erebus lay crumpled like a broken animal, watching Warmaster approach with a mounting fear. He could not defeat this man in pure close-quarters combat. "Get up," Warmaster ordered. Erebus hauled himself to his feet, reclaimed his sword, and summoned the warp. He let out a low cry and unleashed a bolt of violent psychic lightning that whipped through the air. Warmaster roared, and an invisible force flared, intercepting the blast. He surged forward. Their blades met again. The impact sent Erebus tumbling end over end, his weapon flying free. Erebus tried to rise, but failed after several attempts. Warmaster strode over, and for a heartbeat, Erebus thought he would be beheaded. Instead, Warmaster dropped his own weapon, grabbed Erebus's armor, and hoisted him high. Erebus's face twisted in horror. "No, don't," he screamed. The crowd leaned in. Warmaster slammed Erebus knee first into his spine. A sick, bone-crunching sound filled the arena. Erebus's spine snapped. He collapsed to the floor like a puppet with its strings cut. The audience erupted in thunderous cheers. Warmaster bowed to the crowd, triumphant. Erebus lay broken, not only physically, but in spirit. His spine had been crushed, his dignity and self-respect reduced to cinders. He thought the humiliation was finished. He was wrong. The outsiders had no shame. After the duel, medical staff dragged him to the treatment room and repaired his shattered spine and wounds. Erebus was baffled. The Imperium's policy toward traitors was usually execution, not care. Why mend him? Soon after, they shoved him back into the arena. Another champion, weaker than Warmaster, but still formidable, had defeated other prisoners and now faced Erebus. He easily bested the Dark Apostle and again broke his spine. Back to the treatment room, healed. Back to the entrance, injected with stimulants to keep him fighting despite dwindling stamina. "Have you no shame? Have you no shame? Are you treating me like cattle?" Erebus seethed with humiliation, fury, and fear. The stimulants and endless matches were meant to grind him down. After hundreds of challenges, each taxing him to the brink, he lay on the deck with another broken spine, watching the medics approach. This time, he crawled away, refusing to accept help. He would rather die than be used like this. The medics ignored him. They grabbed his ankles, hauled him onto a stretcher, and carried him once more to the treatment room. When the healing was done, they led him back to the arena. Erebus's protests dissolved into hoarse, defeated sounds as they pushed him onward. Meanwhile, on Prospero, two Daemon Primarchs arrived, Fulgrim and Lorgar. Given the current balance of imperial power, Guilliman and the Lion returned, the Imperium rallied, the brothers set aside old rivalries and reunited with another of their own. Magnus, unsurprised, had already foreseen their coming in the fraying strands of fate. "We can't let that fool Guilliman and that outsider act unchecked," Lorgar declared. "We must cooperate." Magnus nodded. He had suffered heavy losses to Guilliman and the newcomer. Fulgrim, nursing the agony of his severed hand, burned with hatred for Guilliman. "I agree," he said. "I have a plan," Lorgar continued, eyes bright with confidence and malice. "What Guilliman values most are his mortal parents. If we find their souls, Guilliman will come. He'll be driven mad and fall into our trap." Magnus felt a chill. "You'll capture Guilliman's parents?" he murmured uneasily. Lorgar's grin was cruel. "I've already sent Daemons. I want Guilliman to know the pain of losing what he holds dear, to hear his despair, to see him beg." Fulgrim's smile matched Lorgar's malice. "I like it. Guilliman will suffer utterly. We must set a trap so he comes and never returns." 293. Abaddon. Who speaks for me? The Black Legion's flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, hung like a wound in a boundless void. Around it drifted countless chaos vessels, hulls of living flesh, overgrown with eyes and fangs, other ships infested with warped creatures, clinging like barnacles. It was a force the Imperium could not face lightly, an armada that could shred a sector and crush all resistance. On the bridge, Abaddon the Warmaster contemplated his next campaign. Since Cadia's fall, he had Throneward in his mind, to open the path to Terra and finish what Horus had begun. The Crimson Crusade had been launched to that end, to stretch Chaos's grip until the false Emperor's rule finally toppled. Yet with Robot Guilliman's return and the rise of that saint, many of his plans had been foiled. The Indomitus Crusade had clawed back worlds and resources. Imperial counterattacks had routed warbands and bled his forces. The Crimson Crusade was on the verge of insolvency. His lieutenant Kayvon Shrike still languished imprisoned on Terra. Before the 13th Black Crusade, Abaddon had been confident, so certain of victory that he sent Kayvon alone to Terra to be seized by the Inquisition, a calculated humiliation meant to tell the High Lords that the Imperium was doomed. Cadia fell, the Great Rift opened, the galaxy rent. He had struck hard, driving loyalists back to Terra itself. But the rise of Guilliman had turned the tide. For now, Kayvon would remain a bargaining chip on Terra. If fortune swung back to chaos, invasion plans could be resumed. Abaddon let his reverie fade and took in the bridge's grandeur. Enormous arch cannons flanked the ship like ribs, some so vast an Imperial knight could have been loaded into their muzzles. Dark Mechanicum servitors fused to the piping like organs. Warp fire snarled from gargoyle vents and licked the void. The grated deck beneath his boots was stained dark with old blood, stains to mark a history of slaughter. Heroes had bled here, even those who fought for the Corpse Emperor and Sanguinius. Abaddon smiled as he slid his hand over the talon of Horus, savoring the memory of Primarch kills that the blade had tasted. Behind him, Drachnian, the Daemon sword, trembled with jealous hunger. "All right," Abaddon murmured to the blade. "You will drink Primarch blood again, perhaps even the Emperor's." He turned to his chief sorcerer. "Show me the galactic situation." "As you wish, Warmaster." The sorcerer bowed, and with a ring of dark acolytes, spun a web of sorcery. Bound loyalists in tattered uniforms were dragged forward, their throats slit, their hot blood spattered across the chaos array, fueling the spell until its runes glowed brighter. A captive female officer rasped as she bled. "You will fail. The God Emperor will triumph. Humanity will not be defeated." Her defiance amused Abaddon. "Your faith makes me smile, pitiful thing. No one can best me, least of all the Chaos Gods." He watched the 8-pointed star etched into the deck flare crimson, its lines knitting together a living map of the galaxy. Images rose and drifted before him, battlefields soaked in blood, corpses piled like hills, screaming beasts roaming ruined cities. The Imperial Aquila lay collapsed and burning among the wreckage of 1,000 worlds. Satisfaction darkened his features. "After Cadia's fall, the Emperor's realm should have bled out," he said. Then his expression soured. It was Guilliman and that saint who'd stalled him. If not for them, the Imperium would have been ground to dust long ago. He pushed the thought down, dismissed the current vision, and reached for another. I will succeed. The age of the Primarchs is past. One day they will kneel before me, Gilliman, Lim, and Russ. Every one of them will be my conquered foe. He vowed it low and cold. He could spend 10,000 years crippling the Imperium, 10,000 more hunting Primarchs if he must. Something cut through his focus, a flare of hellish light and a lurch as the image tilted oddly. A psychic shockwave, laced with raw panic and fury, ripped across the bridge. The sorcerers spasmed, dropping to their knees with faces twisted in agony. Chaos Terminators rushed to form a ring of protection, and then a gust of blinding, wrenching wind hurled them all aside. Flesh-melded cables shrieked as if tortured. From the storm's eye strode 12 tall figures. 3 of them towered like gods: Magnus, Fulgrim, and Lorgar, Daemon Primarchs, invested and terrible. They had reached accord on the sorcerer world and moved with grim purpose. To face Guilliman, Leman Russ, and that saint, they needed power that could rival the Imperium. The Black Legion, swollen with assimilated warbands, was the obvious prize. Magnus had bent the sorcery of the warp time to manifest himself, his brothers and their acolytes aboard the vengeful spirit. Abaddon's eyes went wide. What sorcery is this? Why are these 3 not locked in the Eye of Terror? Lorgar regarded him with a faint curiosity. I did not expect to find Abaddon Warmaster after so many centuries, he said, looking down at the man protected by his Terminators. Lorgar. Abaddon met his gaze. 10,000 years earlier he would have bowed trembling. Now the age had shifted. This was his war. From this moment the Black Legion answers to us, Magnus declared. No, Abaddon spat. The Black Legion belongs to me. You have no right to command it. You have no choice. Magnus extended a hand and an unseen vice closed around Abaddon's throat, hoisting him into the void. Invisible fingers crushed his ceramite until it groaned. Chaos warriors surged to intervene, but Fulgrim and Lorgar stepped forward and fixed them with a look that cowed even the boldest. One by one, the warriors exchanged uncertain glances and sank to their knees, swearing fealty to the 3 demon Primarchs. Abaddon, strangled and furious, forced the words out. All right, I yield. Then they hurled him back to the deck. He landed with a bone-sickening thud. You know what's good for you, Magnus said, his voice like ice. Abaddon staggered to his feet, face hard, but there was no spark of defiance left. Even the blessings of the Chaos Gods could not make him stand against a Daemon Primarch. Magnus surveyed the gathered warband. The kneeling followers pledged themselves, their blood and loyalty, now pledged to the Primarch Triumvirate. Lorgar's smile was a blade. Excellent. Now to business, Guilliman and Lemon Russ. We must find the right place to spring our trap. Lorgar swept his hand, and the 8-pointed star flared, outlining a living star chart of the galaxy. The great rift yawned through it like a wound, jagged and conspicuous. Here, Lorgar said, pointing. The Nachmund Gauntlet, a choke point between the Imperium Nihilus and the Segmentum Solar. Sever this, and the Imperium Nihilus will be cut off from Terra. Our father will lose half his dominion. When a full-scale war erupts and Imperial forces are bogged down, I will force Guilliman's kin, those he holds dear, into a position that will compel him to walk into the trap. We will isolate and destroy them in turn. Plans unfurled like shadowed banners. Chains would be set, bait prepared. The Primarch's alliance had a new aim, to reshape the theater of war and pull the Imperium into a net it could not escape. Gomorrah. Qin Yun stood atop a gleaming Imperial hall and watched the Webway city bustle below. After years of repair and trade, the place had regained a measure of its former prosperity. Ark-Eldar and humans moved through its arteries. Countless ships streamed through the Webway, using Gomorrah as a staging point. Most were Eldar vessels. Human fleets still relied mainly on the warp, but the Webway project was advancing. Several lanes into the Imperium Nihilus had been cleared, and small flotillas had already begun using them. The Imperium would not always be bound by the Nachmund Gauntlet. It's time to set our trap for Abaddon, Qin Yun said. If I can seize the fragments of Sanguinius's soul hiding within the vengeful spirit, I can fully restore him. He had decided to make Sanguinius the first Primarch to be brought back. With him returned, the Imperium would have 3 Primarchs again. Qin Yun mused bitterly that it felt like a second empire emerging, 3 Primarchs rebuilding a new order while others watched from the sidelines. He planned to summon Eldrad and the avatar of the Laughing God, Then coordinate with Gilliman and Lemon Russ, how to lure Abaddon, how to seize the vengeful spirit, how to recover Sanguinius. And once the Nachman gauntlet was shattered, how to move the Imperium into the webway and negotiate transit rights between human and Eldar traffic. Every detail demanded careful deliberation. He was about to call a council when he remembered other business. Zealing. Issue rewards to Damo and the player organizations who fought in the Coronis Expanse, especially those who captured Erebus. Each player team involved will receive a Bronze Eagle medal. Damo had captured Erebus, the most notorious scoundrel in the galaxy. Qin Yun had to see the footage and have Zhiling verify it before he believed it. Erebus was notorious for slipping away. Catching him was no small feat. Understood, Master. Zhiling replied and moved to execute the order. On Atoma, the 13th wave of players came online. Flashes of light heralded their arrivals in broad squares and towering cathedrals. The city filled with newcomers, each one gaping at Warhammer OL's astonishing realism. Shouts of wonder rose and fell. This air, this light and shadow, unreal. I'm not cultured enough for words. It's simply awesome. Amid the awe, some antics remained. Reckless players with forbidden emotes were sometimes struck down to charred husks by automated countermeasures, drawing nervous laughter and gasps in equal measure. I come, I conquer. Brothers, for the Emperor, one player bellowed, arm raised. Voices answered him. For a moment the square was a storm of roaring oaths and laughter, the sound shaking off the lingering chill of the void and the long shadow of war. 294. Vigilante Battle. Atoma Planet once again welcomed a surge of new players. Countless citizens lined the streets and cheered their arrival, holding a small celebration. The god chosen were the Emperor's envoys, his keenest blades and the shields forged for humanity. With them present, people felt hope. The players streamed into Warhammer 0L, shouting and cheering. At the temple, Zhiling's projection appeared and guided the newcomers through the beginner's questline. The Emperor's cheap currency, the Cadia Great Raider, the quest intoned. When she finished, her projection winked out. Immediately, the various player organizations moved in to recruit, swelling their ranks. As long as so many pre-registered, bringing in more is good. Fewer people will be left waiting. MC Epic, recruitment director of MC Dynasty, said, astonished at the sea of faces. Let's get to it. Those bastards from the agricultural college are back on the roasted mushrooms again. Join and get a mech, no questions asked. The recruitment perks were extravagant. MC Dynasty offered 500 large Zerg units and a suit of biomass armor upon enlistment, enough for a small-scale skirmish. Dora Workshop went even further. Mechs, drones, weapons, ammunition, and a battalion of armed servitors. They were buying talent with spectacle, and they could afford it. Dora Workshop had contracted industrial production across multiple star sectors and controlled many resource worlds. Their scale produced enormous profits, letting them recruit lavishly. Both Dora Workshop and MC Dynasty had also launched mega projects, Doom Colossus, a Dyson Sphere, and the like. The two rare allies had agreed to cooperate solely to speed construction. Technical obstacles had been overcome, now only construction remained. Those absurdly large structures would soon rise like dumplings dropped into a boiling pot. To staff and protect these initiatives, they needed new players. Critical positions had to be filled by players to limit corruption by the Chaos Gods and to guard against traitors. Native populations were vulnerable to corruption. Deep cover saboteurs could sink a project and bankrupt even titanic factions. Even with MC Dynasty and Dora Workshop's resources, the funding required for the mega projects was astronomical. Immediately arrange guards to shepherd these God-chosen, someone ordered. Hasn't the Inquisition reported missions tied to the 7 great demons? Let these newcomers take them. The influx of God-chosen put Atoma's public order under strain, but veterans like Feng were used to it. They organized allocations, billeted recruits, and settled the newcomers quickly. For the Emperor, charge! The new players cried as they set out. For the glory of the Imperium. For the beautiful succubi. Their slogans were varied, but their zeal sincere. They prepared to crusade against traitors and Xenos in the Emperor's name. Meanwhile, on Gomorrah, Qin Yun convened a meeting about the Nachman corridor. With the webway between Imperium Sanctus and the dark side repaired, the next great task was resurrecting Sanguinius. Shiling's efforts and the contributions of Lion, Guilliman, the Laughing God's avatar, Eldrad the Farseer, and even Trazyn the Great Collector had brought everyone together. Trazyn's presence made the Laughing God's avatar and the Eldar visibly chilly, but Qin Yun managed to keep the table from breaking into open hostility. Magnus, Lorgar, and Fulgrim have new movements, Eldrad began. They've allied on the Sorcerer's planet and seized Abaddon's hold over the Black Legion. They're clearly gearing up for another major rebellion. You mean those 3 traitors have allied? Guilliman asked from his projection beside the strategic console. Eldrad nodded. The Dance of Fate confirmed it. We also heard the voice of Tzeentch corroborating the intelligence. Lion, lit from within by his aureate power, stroked his chin and frowned. This is dangerous. The 3 together are a fearsome foe. One slip, and we could lose everything. Sanguinius, radiant and grave, asked, any word on Angron, Mortarion, or Perturabo? If those 3 joined Magnus, Lorgar, and Fulgrim, the war could spiral into another battle of Terra. The Chaos Gods would wear humanity down with relentless machinations. Perturabo, particularly, was a master of siegecraft and mechanized warfare, the one who drove the meat of the Terra campaign. He had always believed the Battle of Terra should be a contest among humans, not a playground for gods. His abilities to breach fortresses and build iron cities in the Eye of Terror were legendary. If he joined the Alliance, the Imperium's numerical advantages would be undermined. No news yet, Eldrad said. They may have other plans. If it's only those 3, that's marginally redeeming, Lion said. Magnus and the others taking Abaddon's command means they'll try to leverage the Black Legion against us. We need to know where they plan to fight. Qin Yun opened a holographic star map. If they pick a battlefield, Terra would be their first choice, then the Nakmond corridor. Terra is the heart of the Imperium, the Emperor's seat. Taking Terra would be equivalent to destroying the Imperium, Guilliman said. But with the Indomitus Crusade, we've retaken multiple warp routes to Terra. An assault on Terra now would be suicide. The Imperium's military might would trap them in a quagmire. If they can't attack Terra, they'll hit the next most strategic target, the Nakmond corridor. It's the throat of the Imperium, the essential route for the Imperial Navy, rogue traders, and cargo fleets. Cut it off, and communications between Terra and the dark side are severed. As Qin Yun finished, Shiling materialized beside him and handed over a transmission from Vigilance Star. He read it, his brow tightening for a heartbeat. Then he smiled and shared the content. Latest reports: Black Legion warbands have been ordered to Vigilance Star to prepare for a major engagement. So my suspicions were right. Magnus and the others are aiming at the Nakmond corridor, Lion said. I will depart for Vigilance Star at once, Lion insisted. I won't let them set foot on that world. Vigilance Star is already protected by several fleets. With Lion there, it would be nearly impregnable, Guilliman agreed. Qin Yun, however, shook his head. If there was no webway, Vigilance Star would be an absolute priority, but we now have options. You propose abandoning Vigilance Star? Guilliman looked incredulous. Even with the webway, leaving Vigilance Star unguarded is reckless. If they destroy the Nakmond corridor, they'll attack the webway next. If the webway falls, where do we go? If we want the vengeful spirit to appear, the bait has to be big enough. Qin Yun's voice was calm and firm. Abaddon is cautious. He won't expose the vengeful spirit unless the stakes favor him. Our goal in resurrecting Sanguinius depends on soul fragments. The fragments currently held by the gods are inaccessible. The only real chance lies with the vengeful spirit. We must force a tug-of-war over Vigilance Star, draw out chaos forces, and seize the vengeful spirit to reclaim Sanguinius's fragments. This won't be easy, the Laughing God's avatar warned. Those daemon primarchs wield power not far below a god's. Cyrog, even if he would not admit it, knew Lorgar and the other demon primarchs could contend with lesser gods. Primarchs had been destined to occupy godlike places within humanity's mythos. Even in true form, victory against them would be far from certain. Nothing worthwhile is ever simple, Qin Yun said. We will have to confront these primarchs and their chaos patrons. We must do everything to resurrect and reclaim our lost heroes. That will strengthen our side. Well spoken. Trazyn's metallic hands clapped once, sharp and resonant. The gods are not invulnerable. We Krorks once challenged and bested them, someone scoffed. That was opportunistic, the Laughing God's avatar said coldly. We won, unlike a race that was outright destroyed by the so-called Prince of Pleasure. Trazen's metallic mouth spat that barbed line like poison. More than one Eldar bristled. Trazen's words had a knack for finding the deepest wounds. Enough, Qin Yun cut in before the feud escalated. Now is not the time for recriminations. We have to plan how to draw chaos into incremental battles at Vigilant Star and force them to deploy their forces, exposing the vengeful spirit. Then I will personally oversee Vigilant Star, Lion said. I will control the tempo, let them taste hope so they keep committing troops, but never let them seize victory. Do you have confidence you can manage that? Qin Yun asked. If you doubt me, place more God-chosen under my command. They're perfect instruments for this. Lion's laugh was warm. I will. You can set up a lighthouse on Vigilant Star, and the God-chosen will support you whenever needed. With the God-chosen, I am confident, Lion said. Qin Yun relaxed, nodding. I'll back you at every turn. What about me? Guilliman asked. Am I to be left out of this critical campaign? Of course not, Qin Yun replied. The Nakmon corridor is home to many human worlds. Those populations will suffer if Vigilant Star falls and the corridor collapses. We must rescue them, and that calls for a Primarch of unparalleled wisdom and leadership. Guilliman nodded. The meeting dissolved into preparations, troop allocations, schedules, and contingency plans. The tug-of-war for Vigilant Star would be a delicate gambit, a balance of hope and denial intended to draw the vengeful spirit out and give the Imperium its only chance to recover Sanguinius's fragments. P.S. Another chapter. Thank you for your support. 295. Lady Yudon. Since you value me so highly, I will gladly accept this task. Qin Yun smiled at the praise, pleased. Don't worry, I will oversee the evacuations and make absolutely certain that Imperial citizens across the worlds of the Nakmon corridor suffer no needless harm. Guilliman's voice was steady. Sanguinius, Qin Yun continued, what's my task? Even as a remnant soul, the Archangel's strategic mind and strength far outstripped a normal warrior's. As for you, have Dante take your body to Vigilant Star and prepare for your resurrection. As long as we can retrieve your soul, even if a full resurrection proves impossible, we will reunite you both immediately. He turned to Sanguinius. Whether that means using the Death God's power or the Emperor's, your physical form is required. If possible, be revived on Vigilant Star. There's no need to rush back to Baal. Mephiston, standing nearby, interjected, I will convince the chapter master. That's settled then. The rest can wait until you're restored, Qin Yun said to Sanguinius. After assigning the tasks to the three Primarchs responsible for the Vigilant Star Theater, he faced the avatar of the Laughing God and Eldrad. We will still need the Eldari's help protecting the webway. Magnus's mastery of the warp is unmatched among the Primarchs, Eldrad said. During the Battle of Terra, he attacked the Emperor within the webway again and again, preventing the Emperor from securing Terra and enabling the demons to land. In the early stages, the Emperor alone stopped demons from entering Holy Terra. Only after Typhus's plague tactics tore open the defenses and Magnus continuously struck the Emperor from within the webway did our warp defenses collapse and let demons pour onto Terra. Vulcan was sent into the webway to clash with Magnus. He was slaughtered repeatedly, yet through sheer will and his transhuman resilience, he managed to kill back and protect the Emperor. After that, Makador found him a charred ruin. He had no good flesh left. With every step toward Terra, his burned skin crumbled away. Eldrad's voice was bleak. Magnus could very well be using the warp to glean intelligence. It's highly likely he already knows about our secret webway construction. Qin Yun waved his hand. The projection before them shifted, showing the labyrinthine channels of the webway. We must be doubly prepared. First, we will monitor the Vigilant Star campaign constantly, baiting chaos to commit more forces and drawing out the vengeful spirit. Second, we must defend the webway itself, reinforce fortifications at all key nodes to prevent anything Magnus might attempt. When it comes to the webway, the Eldari are unsurpassed. I entrust you with its protection. The webway is the foundation of Eldari existence. Protecting it is protecting yourselves, Eldrad added. The Eldari were silent, glancing at the avatar of the Laughing God for his response. When he finally spoke, it was measured. We will assist in defending the webway, but we must be given command of Imperial forces. The Eldari population is already so diminished that we cannot afford attrition. You mean humans can afford attrition? A sudden voice cut in. Trazin's interruption made Qin Yun almost laugh. He was playing villain perfectly. Trazin's oily green eyes fixed on the great prophet. His metallic face wore a human-like smirk. I am an Imperial advisor, he said. Do you know what an advisor does? I can say what you cannot. I can criticize what you cannot criticize. The saint chose me. You will have to accept that. Eldrad bristled. This does not concern you. His contempt was plain. You. Eldrad's face flushed with anger, but Qin Yun stepped between them, diffusing the rising tension. He turned back to the avatar of the laughing god. Giving you command of Imperial troops is too much to concede. However, I can appoint you as Imperial military strategists. You will advise and shape plans. Your people need not fight. That will do. The avatar accepted the compromise without surprise. The demand for command had been a bargaining chip, a way to secure more influence. Cyrog, who often appeared as a joker, was not a fool. An entity who could outmaneuver chaos deities understood trickery and conspiracy better than most. Underestimating him would be perilous. Qin Yun scanned the assembly. No one spoke. Very well, proceed according to plan. With that, he adjourned the council, and the gathered leaders dispersed. On the rock, Azrael lingered, watching the Interstellar War Council end. He was displeased. As the Emperor's son and the first Primarch, Lionel Johnson should have presided over this meeting. Why did the Saint? Even if the Emperor had suffered grievous harm, Lionel Johnson, as first Primarch, had the most legitimate claim. Azrael did not deny the Saint's contributions, but matters like succession should have been clarified. Otherwise, a new civil war might erupt later. Zabriel, the Fallen, Ezekiel, and the other Dark Angels officers exchanged uneasy looks. Azrael had crossed a dangerous line. None dared answer. Lionel Johnson fixed his son with a cutting gaze that seemed to strip bare flesh and soul. Azrael felt the stare and realized he had been foolish, but he remained convinced he was right. The Great Crusade had left too many things unspoken, and those ambiguities birthed the Horus heresy. Concealment now could only seed a future civil war. Lion spoke calmly. He could have struck Azrael decades ago, but now he chose reason. The Saint is an incarnation of my father. If it is possible, he will be the Imperium's rightful second emperor. Azrael's eyes widened. The Lion actually acknowledged that succession. That is illogical, Azrael protested. The burden of the Imperium is immense. In the past, I might have staked a claim, but now I feel utterly unsuited to rule. Lion's voice remained steady. We made a grave mess. The Horus heresy proves it. My father's failures set the stage, and as Primarchs we were not noble. We craved power and vanity and warred for them. That pressure is what twisted Horus. Once he became War Master, he dared not admit error for fear of being questioned. He became isolated and vulnerable, and the Chaos Gods tore him open. This time we must fight for humanity, not for honor or power. He looked at Azrael. I will not contend with the Saint for rulership. He is doing well. There is no need to change that. Do not bring this topic up again. Our priority now is to sail for Vigilant Star. A new great war awaits. Gomorrah, inside a newly constructed Eldari temple, the avatar of the laughing god, Eldrad, and other Eldari gathered in private. No human would come here. What they planned would remain hidden. A crystal projected a map of the webway. Keep this secret, the avatar said. Humans will become our greatest enforcers if we play this right. Eldrad traced the projection. For the Eldari to rise again, we must first eliminate the god of pleasure, and second, rebuild the webway. Humans will not willingly wage war on the god of pleasure, so we cannot obtain the last sword of the old ones needed to fully awaken the death god. Without the death god, killing the pleasure god will be near impossible. For now, we must concentrate on rebuilding the webway. Use this chance to reclaim key node cities and have humans stitch together the webway to the craft worlds. Will humans discover this? Hyrandri, a Veil Walker, asked anxiously. No, the avatar said. We will cloak it as webway protection, mix fact and fiction. They will not notice, and even if they did, that saint would not sever ties over it. He understands the Imperium needs the Eldari at this stage. Aboard the Vengeful Spirit, Magnus, Fulgrim, and Lorgar conferred in the Wolf God's court. Abaddon and other Chaos warriors stood nearby. Abaddon bristled at his own impotence. Even blessed by the Chaos gods, he was no match for the three Daemon Primarchs. One day, he vowed, he would make them pay. That saint has repaired the webway, Magnus said. Simply destroying the Nachmund corridor won't sever Terra from the Imperium's dark flank. We need a two-pronged assault. Tear down the Nachmund corridor and wage a new war in the webway. I've gleaned much intelligence from the demons, Magnus continued. I know Imperial movements. Our forces aren't ample enough for a two-front war, Lorgar warned. We should destroy the Nachmund corridor first, then strike at the webway. Fulgrim smiled cruelly. While the three of us are occupied, others might not be. Isn't Mortarion often unavailable? Mortarion isn't easy to summon, Lorgar said warily. If we can't call him, we could try Typhus, call the Death Guard's true chapter master. He would delight in disrupting the webway. Let Araman go, Magnus decided. He can convince Typhus. Araman knows much about the webway and can guide him into it. They shifted to plans for Vigilant Star, just as a group of Chaos sorcerers entered. Their leader carried a transparent crystal orb in which floated the soul of a woman in a sky-blue uniform. The Daemon Primarchs' faces tightened. Guilliman's foster mother, Lady Udon, floated within. When Guilliman learns his foster mother is in our hands, he will snap, Fulgrim hissed. I cannot wait. Execute the plan at once, Magnus ordered. Let us hear the desperate roar of our Primarch brother. Warbands were mobilized. Successive assaults struck at Vigilance Star, and they planned to reverse its Blackstone field and collapse the Nachmund corridor. Imperial forces counterattacked hard, and furious battles ignited. At the same time, an orc fleet poured into the fray and dove straight into the massacre, turning the battlefield into chaos. Lionel Johnson and Guilliman followed their assigned roles. One to Vigilance Star to lead the defense against the Demon Primarchs, the other to oversee evacuations across the corridor. But plans always bend to circumstance. As soon as Lion arrived, a Starseer received an urgent cryptic vision. Lady Udon was in Lorgar's custody. Sealing immediately relayed the intelligence to Qin Yun. What did you say? Qin Yun leapt to his feet. Lorgar has Lady Udon's soul trapped in a ritual? Shieling nodded. Yes, it's complicated. Assemble the troops at once. I'm heading to Vigilance Star. Qin Yun had intended to remain in Gomorrah, but Sheiling's report made that impossible. Guilliman would never allow Lady Udon's soul to be abused by Lorgar. Even if it was a trap, Guilliman would plunge in without hesitation. Qin Yun could only follow. 296. Guilliman awakens. Qin Yun's guess had been right. When Guilliman learned that Lady Udon's soul was in Lorgar's hands, he handed the evacuation of civilians to Commander Calgar, who had just arrived from Makraj with reinforcements, and led a strike force to hunt down Lorgar. He swore he would reclaim Lady Udon's soul. Sanguinius felt a pang of disappointment. Guilliman had not been so eager to help retrieve the remnant soul from the vengeful spirit, but the moment Guilliman heard anything had happened to his adoptive mother, he changed completely. Guilliman, you can't be so impulsive, Sicarius tried to reason from the bridge of the Makraj's honor. This is too dangerous. You're going up against three traitorous brothers. With all due respect, this has no chance of success. Those three are clearly baiting us, Lion transmitted, trying to hold his brother back. We should bring Archangel and coordinate. No matter the cost, I must ensure Lady Udon's safety, Guilliman answered. He ignored Lion's counsel, and when Lion pushed again, cut the comm link. Lion, who had planned to garrison Vigilance Star and wear down the Chaos forces, could not stop his brother from going off half-cocked, but he would not leave him alone. Reluctantly, he handed the defense over to Azrael and led Zabriel and other fallen angels to reinforce Guilliman. Guilliman's recklessness enraged Lion, but he would not let three traitors face Guilliman by themselves. Lorgar and the other Daemon Primarchs had seized the night world of Dalrock in the Nachmund corridor and were waiting there. Dalrock, in the Nachmund subsector, had long since fallen into paranoia under the High Knight family Manticore after the Great Rift. Refugees were persecuted, dissent grew, civil war erupted. Lorgar, Fulgrim, and Magnus crushed the Loyalists, corrupted the Manticores, and turned Dalrock into a Chaos Knight world. In the name of the ruinous powers, Lorgar raised a colossal altar on Dalrock's surface and imprisoned Lady Udon's soul within it. layered with the despair and fury scraped from countless dead. It was a clear trap meant to draw Guilliman and to corrupt him. Sicarius' head throbbed as he watched his master prepare. Guilliman even ordered the Adeptus Mechanicus to shut down the Macragge's honors beacon to prevent any teleportation interference. No God-chosen reinforcements would materialize to stop him. Sicarius feared Guilliman could not think clearly when Lady Udon was involved. One-on-one, the Primarchs could be challenged. 1-on-3, he was facing certain doom. "I don't need victory," Guilliman told him. "I just want those 3 bastards dead. I will never allow anyone to defile Lady Udon's soul." Sicarius sighed and relayed the order to launch a void assault on Dalrock. The Chaos defenses there were brutal and haphazard. Debris fields of warped derelicts and converted Manticore warships littered the planet's low orbits, and Omega Thraxis, the Forge World satellite, had fallen to the Dark Mechanicum and continually supplied weapons. Still, after reforms and technological revolutions, the Imperial Navy was stronger than before. Under Guilliman's command, the Gloriana-class Macragge's Honor led the fleet. Battleships followed, blasting enemy vessels and orbital citadels, while transports stood ready to disgorge Primaris forces. The Void battle was savage. Energy beams and explosions flickered like storm-flung stars. The Imperium paid dearly in ships and souls, but they severed Dalrock's connection to Omega Thraxis, punched through the debris belts, and tore the enemy's screen open. Transports streamed through the breach. After orbital bombardment, Imperial forces descended. On the ground, Chaos Knights, Traitor Astartes, Astra Militarum rebels, demonic engines of the Dark Mechanicum, and warp-spawn daemons awaited. The initial landing seized beachheads, but Dalrock's complex terrain and tight fortifications turned the invasion into a grinding nightmare. Lorgar, Fulgrim, and Magnus, while not the most brilliant tacticians among the Primarchs, were far above mortal generals. They set layered defenses and exploited a planet-spanning network of caverns that allowed Chaos forces to reappear through dozens of exits. Every gain by the Imperium was costly. The 2 sides bled and stalled. When Lion and Qin Yun arrived with reinforcements, they found Guilliman's forces mired in combat. Without comment, they committed to the fight. With their arrival, the stalemate began to break, and the Chaos lines started to give way. Elsewhere, Abaddon on the Vengeful Spirit struck viciously at Vigilance Star, attempting to reverse its Blackstone field and rend the Nakmund corridor. In the webway, Typhus and Ahriman kept to plan, pouring daemons into the labyrinthine fortresses the Imperium had carved into the webway. Massive numbers of daemons surged. If not for young Fulgrim's presence and the Eldar forces, the Imperium's hold on the webway might have collapsed. "We must act fast," Qin Yun said. "They expected us and are hitting Vigilant Star and the webway at the same time." "Let the forces press the offensive," Lion replied. "We strike their core. If we banish the 3 of them, this war is over." 3 against 3. Let's see who wins," Qin Yun agreed. Guilliman offered a curt apology for dragging them in. Lion promised a reckoning after the battle. "Now is not the time for recriminations," Qin Yun cut in. "Now we attack." The accompanying tech priests locked on the altar and beamed Qin Yun, the 2 Primarchs, and a hand-picked group of elites and player commanders down to the surface. They hit the ground into a world given over to the warp. The closer they drew to the altar, the thicker the warp tide became. The very earth writhed like living flesh, and the air tasted of whispers that urged slaughter. "Kill! Kill! Kill! Hack! Hack! Hack!" the voices screamed. Ristbro howled like a blood-crazed chosen of Khorne and swung his battle axe, cleaving daemons in a tide of gore. Warmaster Shi Lang, Ningba Ren, and others formed around him, their blades unreeling a bloody path. The Emperor Numa battle group, among the most battle-hardened chapters in the player's cohort, joined Qin Yun and tore through the enemy. Guilliman and Lion led their personal retinues into the swell of daemons. Sicarius kept a watchful eye, preventing Guilliman from charging off alone. Zabriel and the fallen angels fought with grim ferocity. Qin Yun soared above the fray on a gust of psychic force, spear flashing as he harvested flying demons. From time to time, he unleashed sweeping psychic blasts or warm faith energy to heal wounded heroes. Even as the Imperials drowned in demonic tide, they hewed a bloody lane toward the altar. At the summit of the altar stood Lorgar, Fulgrim, and Magnus. Around them swarmed demons of extraordinary power, chosen servants of the ruinous powers. Lorgar bellowed down at Guilliman. Guilliman, surrender. Swear to the gods and your adoptive mother will be returned to you, blessed. He drew an iron chain and dragged out a dazed soul. Guilliman's breath caught. Lady Udon, even after years, she looked as she had when she first found him. Young, watchful, the steward who had raised him when Connor, king of Macragge, had been too occupied and his wife had died. Lady Udon had tended to Guilliman like a mother. Release her, Lorgar, Guilliman shouted. If you have grievances, bring them against me. Ha ha! Kneel before me. Lorgar jabbed his staff toward the soul. Swear, or I shatter her utterly. Guilliman cut down the daemon in front of him, and seeing the destructive sorcery coalescing in Lorgar's staff, forced his anger back for the moment. Stop, Lorgar. You cannot harm her. If all you want is my submission, then I will kneel. Stop, Lorgar commanded, and for an instant both sides stilled. Don't trust him, Lion hissed. Lorgar lies. I have no choice, Guilliman murmured. I will kneel to you, you bastard. When Lady Udon met his eyes, whatever fog had clouded her gaze cleared. She recognized the child who always challenged danger and disobeyed orders. Guilliman, no, she cried. Compromise only feeds them. Then, to everyone's horror, she hurled herself at Lorgar's staff. Her soul smashed against the iron and fractured into dust that blew away before their eyes. No! Guilliman's scream shattered the battlefield. Something inside him broke like a sealed dam. Rage, pure and terrible, surged up and overtook him. Angrath, the chief daemon of Khorne, guardian of the brass citadel, the lord of bloodletters, stepped forward, burning battle-axe raised to cleave Guilliman. Guilliman met the blow with his sword. Metal rang, and with an inhuman motion, Guilliman drove Angrath's axe from his grasp. He struck with a closed fist and shattered half the daemon's skull. With a single sweep of the Emperor's sword, he split the chief daemon clean in two. Hot ichor spouted like a rain of blood. For a moment, the battlefield fell into stunned silence. Angrath, one of Khorne's most favored, lay destroyed by Guilliman in 2 strokes. Lorgar. Guilliman's roar was less a word than a beast's cry. Reason and restraint fell away. Only a raw, brutal hunger for slaughter remained. A wild, ravaging aura burst from him. The Chaos Gods who had been watching Vigilant Star turned their heads. In the Brass Realm, Khorne himself flinched in a rare instant of pause. He had miscalculated. This Primarch's fury was nearer to pure, unchained rage than even Angron's. Lorgar's face hardened into something like fear. Magnus and Fulgrim exchanged a look of alarm. None of them had been told Guilliman contained this. The 3 traitors had spent ages underestimating the man at their opposite. Around them, Warmaster and the other players could only stare as Guilliman charged like an avenging storm. This was the awakening of the Avenger of Souls. P.S. Another chapter. Thank you all for your support. The Emperor had fashioned 20 sons, each inheriting a facet of his essence. The Lion became a consummate Dark King. Countless secret tasks that could not be made public were carried out by him. The Dark Angels were the Empire's last line. Cross that line, and the Dark Angels' retribution followed. Fulgrim's life was an extreme pursuit of beauty and perfection. Perturabo excelled in architecture and war machines. Jagatai Khan chased speed and freedom. Dorn possessed rock-like endurance. Conrad Kurze embodied an unflinching, murderous sense of justice. Every Primarch had their strength. Before the others, Guilliman had stood out for his political and operational genius, but that polish came from decades of schooling by his adoptive parents. Those talents were not the marrow of his being. In the Emperor's design, Guilliman was a son of rage, an embodiment of vengeance and war. His statesmanship and logistics were refinements growing out of a deeper, darker core. He had inherited the Emperor's pure fury. Angron's rage had been the product of the Butcher's nails and his ruined fate. Sanguinius's had come from his tragic pride and defiance. Guilliman, however, had always resisted his warp inheritance. That resistance left him peculiarly vulnerable. His warp sensitivity and resistance were anomalously weak for a Primarch, and he had suffered repeated defeats at the hands of sorcery. Then Uton's soul died, and something fundamental broke. Guilliman slipped into berserk fury and, for the first time, embraced his warp essence. Pure wrath overwhelmed reason. Psychic power swirled into him like a maelstrom. Behind him, the hint of crimson wings seared into being. His eyes became coals of fury. His body glowed with an aura reminiscent of the Emperor. Demons and chaos warriors caught in his path were incinerated by that incandescent wrath. The sorceries hurled by chaos sorcerers and the might of Tsinchian greater demons crashed against him and burned away. Warp energy could no longer wound him as before. Angron's fall had been the first domino. Now Guilliman, wielding the Emperor's sword, charged like a wild beast unleashed. The blade's annihilating power reduced daemons to absolute nothingness. Their eternal essences were erased with no chance of rebirth. Many demons, seeing the effect, shrieked and fled. Kairos Fateweaver beat his wings and fled into the sky. Shalaxi Hellbane, Slanesh's favored greater demon, broke off to target outsiders. The greater daemons were not Khorne's mindless blood beasts. Whoever chose to stop Guilliman did so at their own peril. Qin Yun seized the moment. While much of the fighting focused on the ground, he plunged upwards, spear in hand, and charged the two-headed daemon Carlos. Carlos could see past and future, but not the present. Caught off guard, he was impaled and banished back to the warp. The lion, seeing Shalaxi slaughtering players, used the forest to close the distance and, with a sudden strike of the Emperor's shield, smashed the Slanesh daemon's head and sent her screaming back into the warp. "Protect the Regent! Stay centered on him! Don't get bogged down! Move with him!" Lion barked. After his own duel, he ordered his troops to follow Guilliman and prevent him from being overwhelmed by the enemy tide. Qin Yun fought through the falling demons and dropped his altitude, trying to bring Guilliman back to reason. His aura of sanity could even pierce the black rage in the Blood Angels. But it had no purchase now. Guilliman was utterly mad. All he saw was Lorgar upon the high platform. Nothing else existed. He surged over corpses and climbed the dais. "Lorgar!" Guilliman roared. The flames on the Emperor's sword flared hotter. As he advanced, the pair of flaming wings behind him spread fully. Lorgar stared, aghast. This was more terrifying than Angron's descent into daemonhood. Guilliman had ascended without the Chaos God's blessing. He had shattered the warp's old law, the gods no longer the gatekeepers. Rage, human, pure, ancient, had materialized and fused with Guilliman. "Perhaps we can talk," Lorgar pleaded, raising his staff. "We are brothers, true blood brothers. Die." Guilliman's single answer was the world's bluntest sentence. Reason had been eclipsed by one imperative: kill Lorgar. Khorne, in the Brass Realm, watched and licked his metaphorical lips. He had once been blind to Guilliman's worth. Now he drooled at the sight. Whether he could claim Guilliman as an archangel or not mattered little. He would accept a son who cut a swath like this. Khorne had once tried to make Guilliman his favorite in place of Angron, but the Emperor had blocked that blessing. Now the god raged and roared in frustration, but Guilliman cared nothing for divine politicking. He only wanted to kill. The combat was titanic. Guilliman struck with the Emperor's sword, while Lorgar countered with runic sorcery and his staff. Each clash rang with the tone of collapsing worlds. Shockwaves swept outward like hurricanes. Lorgar had once believed his daemonhood and the god's favors made him invulnerable. Now he was being shoved back, hammered step by step. Guilliman's strikes were like tectonic blows. Even Lorgar's meteoric magic could not stay the assault. The two of them made the sky itself seem to burn. He's like a god of wrath. Even Khorne's daemons sprang back from a fight that felt bigger than war. The War Master watched, stunned. Primarch duels were cataclysms. The stronger the warp tide, the more terrible the damage. He knew without doubt that Guilliman and Lorgar together could rend a world, snuff a star. "I need to find a chance to absorb more warp authority fragments," Shi Lang murmured. Authority fragments were the player's path to ascension. The game's lore said enough fragments might be enough to make a mortal feel godlike, perhaps 7 or 8/10 of a Primarch's power. "Primarchs are Primarchs," Ningba Ren sighed. "Guilliman has finally stood up." "It took killing a loved one," Haigui remarked. "The trope is blunt, but it's the only way." Shi Lang explained softly as they fought. "To make a Primarch wholly devoted, give loving parents. To break one, take those parents from him." Angron's despair came when the nails were driven in and his adoptive father died. Perturabo turned bitter the day he killed his adoptive sister. Guilliman had always been the most obedient to his mother. Only Yutan's death could force his embrace of the warp. "Too harsh. Let's just kill the ops team," the War Master joked over comms as he slashed a demon. Isn't that Warhammer? All good things perish. The players fought and argued as the battle turned. On the high platform, Fulgrim and Magnus moved to aid Lorgar, only to find Qin Yun and the Lion countering them. None of them wanted Guilliman left alone against three. They wouldn't allow the traitor Primarchs to gang up. Lion faced Magnus. Qin Yun engaged Fulgrim. Fulgrim, bloodied and furious over an earlier loss, his arms severed by Qin Yun and Guilliman, lashed out with three poisoned swords. Qin Yun fought him back. He was no slouch, his faith and the Emperor's blessing making him a match for demon Primarchs. Magnus fared worse. Lion's awakened warp essence birthed a misty forest that dampened warp sorcery. Cut off from his greatest weapon, Magnus was pummeled. The Emperor's shield slammed into his skull again and again until, with a cry, Magnus ripped open a warp gate and escaped. Lorgar, forced to use all his power to check Guilliman, fled as well. He would have been cut down otherwise, the Emperor's sword cut clean. Fulgrim, isolated after his comrade's rout, was savage but outmatched. Qin Yun and Lion together and Guilliman's fury overwhelmed him. In a few brutal exchanges, Lion smashed his head and Guilliman lopped an arm. Slaanesh, herself watching, could not bear to let her favorite die and forcibly pulled him into her domain. After the three Daemon Primarchs fled and the remaining traitors scattered, Guilliman did not immediately return to himself. He continued to roar and hack at the air, attempting to tear open a warp portal. If he entered the warp like that, none could guess what he would become. Qin Yun and Lion exchanged a look, then surged together and brought him low. With a coordinated strike of the Emperor's shield, they knocked the enraged Primarch unconscious. "Take him back to Macragge's honor sanctuary," Qin Yun ordered. Sicarius led the Primarch guard to lift their lord. They would bear him to the flagship and seek the Emperor's guidance if needed. With the demon Primarchs driven off, the remaining traitors and daemons posed no real threat. Under the combined annihilation of players and loyal Imperial heroes, the enemies were routed and the world of Darok reclaimed. The traitorous knightly houses were purged, the High King executed, and the Imperial Aquila flew once more over Darok's hive cities. Far away, on Vigilance Star, fresh violence erupted. Abaddon had descended to the surface and led an assault in person. Azrael, Grand Master of the Dark Angels, had been hard-pressed and grievously wounded. Commander Calgar was racing to his side. The galaxy remained a furnace, victories bought with blood, and a Primarch dragged to the brink by the very power that made him a god. 298. Dad, it's time to go home. As Azrael fell to Abaddon in single combat, Vigilance's fate plunged into darkness. Orcs, Chaos Warriors, and Imperial forces tore through the ruined streets in a frenzied struggle for every block. Artillery hammered the city again and again. Survivors were herded into shelters and shuttled off-planet by logistics units. Those left behind endured scenes of pure terror, wandering, shrieking apparitions, and other unnatural omens that only deepened the panic. Night made the Great Rift more terrible still, its colors shifting from blinding white to a putrid violet. Command marked the anomalies across the operational maps, blotches that looked like mold spreading over a damp wall. Psychers probed and prophesied, but every divination drew the same dark picture, a vast ship crushing stars, signaling that vigilance was fated to be consumed by the vengeful spirit. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm the Imperial defenders, Commander Calgar arrived with a mighty fleet. The warships filled the sky and drove back chaos and orc forces in orbit, seizing the advantage among the void hulks. But the true battle was now on the surface. Abaddon's lieutenant, Starslayer Harkin, led the ground assault with 9 Wordbearers war leaders, the triple demonic conclave. They enslaved citizens and erected black stone demon crowns at Vigilance's geomantic nodes to bend warp energies and call forth fiends. Each district they seized was dragged deeper into darkness. Monsters prowled the fallen zones. No living thing dared enter where the haunted territories ate flesh and sanity alike. The Wordbearer's work was reversing Vigilance's black stone field, shrinking the Nachmund corridor. Black stone is no ordinary mineral. It has warp duality, able to repel the warp or to amplify chaos. The Nachmund corridor exists because of that anti-warp field. Vigilance and the Red Earth Star are both rich in black stone. Buried in both planets are long spike-like black stone formations, drainage needles, pointing at each other and resonating, maintaining the corridor. Trazyn the Infinite's intelligence hinted these worlds were crafted by the star gods to counter the warp. Over time, much of the Blackstone field was destroyed, ripping the galaxy apart. Abaddon's goal was simple and brutal: close the Nachmund corridor and cripple the Imperium. He had no desire to waste time wiping out every defender on vigilance. That would risk intervention by Primarchs such as Guilliman or the Lion. Instead, he would destroy the anti-warp Blackstone he could, implant demon crowns that would resonate with the warp, and reverse the field, turning the planet into a chaos focal point to seal the corridor. By now, the Word-Bearers had installed enough demon crowns at psychic leyline nodes to begin reversing Vigilance's polarity. Calgar originally planned to mass forces to retake the world, but direct orders rerouted him: find the vengeful spirit first, even if Vigilance fell. He thus only partially regained orbital control, enough to deploy surface forces in support of Azrael, but not to retake the system outright. The Blood Angels, too, forces from Baal, slipped into the system and hung shadowed above the battle, waiting for signs of the vengeful spirit. The ritual neared completion. The Chaos forces still needed a few more demon crowns to meet the requirements. The Imperial line under Calgar held with dogged tenacity, forcing Abaddon's hand. When the vengeful spirit itself entered the fray, demons poured through the warp rifts and swarmed Imperial decks. Every Imperial warship was assaulted. If not for the desperate valor of the players, the volunteer fighters aboard many ships, the fleet might have collapsed. The players fought wave after wave of daemons in corridor and hangar, but the demons were relentless. Imperial legends answered the call. The living Saint Celestine, Grey Knights Grandmasters, and even the rumored Sly Marbo appeared to stem the tide. Abaddon then ordered orbital bombardment to sap the ground defenders. Torpedoes and missiles hammered Vigilance. Spear-like lances of light pierced sky and street like pillars. Saturation bombing smashed anti-warp black stone nodes and drew the cursed scars that had been at the system's edge inward. With the anti-repulsion field weakened, the demon crowns flickered to life, and the dam holding back the warp fractured. Fiends materialized, and whole districts folded into Ghost Realm. Calgar personally held the last vital nodes, buying time to prevent the planet's total collapse. Abaddon chose to press the attack by boarding the vengeful spirit itself. As the Great Raider engaged, Blood Angels detachments and covert strike teams launched from the flanks, aiming straight for the daemon ship. The vengeful spirit's shields were legendary, protected by a coven of chaos sorcerers who constantly forewarned the ship of incoming strikes. The Red Corsairs screened the vessel, fending off the Imperial fleet's fire. Still, a Harlequin troop's cunning opened a gap in the vengeful spirit's defenses, and a massive boarding action followed. Hundreds of assault teams in dropcraft and teleport strikes slammed into the ship's interior. Fierce fights flared in dozens of corridors. But many of those assaults were diversions. The real objective was a special operations team led by Erlongu Kangbazi to retrieve the lost soul of Sanguinius. The team made for the boarding deck closest to the bridge, counting on the chaos of the boarding action to draw the ship's defenders away. Inside, the vengeful spirit was a nightmare made flesh. Corridors had been corrupted, sinew and organ lined the walls, transparent vessels trickled blood, and floors were slick with mucus. Flesh pulsed and swallowed light. This would make a great horror film set, Erlongu muttered, but they all kept a wary watch. Warp corruption was worse than any staged fright. Heads might not simply protrude from walls, whole daemon forms could emerge and crawl. "Advance," Mephiston ordered. "Find the Archangel's soul." They ran past the pulsing growths and pits that gaped like throats. At times a heartbeat echoed from the dark, and sometimes faint echoes of past moments shimmered in peripheral visions. Mutant servitors and daemons lurked in walls and alcoves, bursting out with snarls to ambush the team. The players met them with everything they had, dying sometimes to open a path for the rest. Mephiston and the Blood Angels supported them, but casualties mounted. "Damn it!" someone screamed as a player was seized by a massive fleshy hand from the ceiling. Dozens of hooked mouths tore into him. Others fired up, shredding the ambusher, but the player was already torn to pieces. Good thing we brought the god-chosen, Mephiston said darkly. Without such sacrificial assets, he could not imagine how many lives it would take just to reach the bridge. The players cracked grim jokes even as they fell. The team pushed on and finally reached the bridge itself. It was worse than the corridors. Loyalist corpses hung from cables, demonic mutations kept the ship's systems running, and Chaos warriors patrolled like vultures. After a bloody skirmish, the patrols were routed. The players and Blood Angels searched the area for Sanguinius's soul, but found nothing, only living tissue, shattered machine demons, and the stench of decay. I think this sculpture's wrong, Erlongu said, standing before a hideous sculpture. An angel of rotting flesh, broken limbs, a long spear, wings half revealed to white bone, an obscene mockery. There is a problem, Mephiston agreed, and he stepped forward. He reached out and sounded the thing with his spirit. Waves of rancor and despair slammed against him, nearly breaking his soul. Had he not already accepted the Black Angel's grace, it might have consumed him. In the first terrible wash of dark power, though, he felt something else beneath it, a sacred thread, vast and familiar, a blood bond. Father, Mephiston whispered. He realized the soul sealed in that sculpture was indeed the Archangel's. The players crowded forward. Should we move it? What else can we do? Someone asked. But it was enormous. Hauling it away would be time-consuming and costly. Mephiston drew his gauntlet off, took a dagger, and cut his palm. Crimson welled, but the Primaris physiology sealed the wound fast. He smeared the still fresh blood across the sculpture. By the blood of the Son, I awaken the soul of the Father, he intoned. Awaken, Archangel. You have slept long enough. Cracks spidered through the flesh. Light burst out, and the corrupted tissue flaked away like ash. The busted shell shattered, and a golden soul emerged, radiant as a sun. Shadows in the bridge shrieked and recoiled from the light, fleeing into corners the brilliance could not reach. Sanguinius? Someone breathed. The Archangel? Another whispered, awed. How strong would he be if all his shards were gathered? Someone else wondered. As befits one who stood against the Chaos gods, 3/10 of his glory already, Mephiston said, eyes bright with fierce reverence. No sooner had they reclaimed that portion of his soul than Chaos warriors surged toward the bridge again, intent on denying the team its prize. Mephiston stepped forward, extending a gauntleted hand to the luminous figure. Come, Father, it's time to go home. Stop them! A Chaos warrior charged, a bloodied chain axe swinging. In Sanguinius's hand, a spear of pure light coalesced. He hurled it with lethal force, the shaft piercing the warrior's heavy armor and pinning him to the floor of heaving flesh. Even in soul form, Sanguinius was a terrible warrior. A strange roar rolled through the ship. Cracks of light split open reality itself, and huge warped demons hurled themselves through, leaping at the special squad. The Chaos gods gaze fixed on the vengeful spirit. With the outsider's rise, the cursed had become bolder. If Sanguinius were restored, imperial power would surge, and the advantage Chaos had carved from Cadia and the Great Rift would be undone. Before the rift, the Imperium had been stalled by its own high lords. Chaos had expected permanent supremacy after tearing the galaxy. No one had expected an outsider to appear, immensely powerful and able to call forth high-dimensional servants. Guilliman had returned once, Lionel Johnson too. The return of the Archangel would make Imperial forces truly fearsome. The Chaos gods were determined to prevent Sanguinius's revival and trap his soul forever. Mephiston threw out a hand and summoned a lightning bolt that tore through the enemy ranks, incinerating everything in its path and opening a corridor. He barked an order to every assault team that had boarded the vengeful spirit. At all costs, get the Archangel off this ship. Kill! The players answered first, surging forward with a frenzy of cries and bizarre slogans. Blood for the throne, skulls for the emperor, as they hacked and burned through the devils. Budungo Jishuanjan shouted and swept his blade through a blood-red daemon. Its eyes flickered with some confused recognition. Did the occupant of the golden throne matter to the god it worshipped? But the question was cut off as his sword ripped it back into the warp. The players fought with manic courage, reckless and remorseless. For a time, the tide of demons and chaos warriors, though enormous, was held at bay, slaughtered into rivers of blood. Brothers, we're here! Another player squad crashed into the fray. For the Battle of Nakman Corridor, Sealing had issued major commands, mobilizing elite players across the galaxy to ensure Sanguinius's revival. This new arrival was the 13th Legion, diverted from the Vigilance campaign. Their ranks included Lobster Soup. Excellent. Erlongu Kangbazi's face lit up. We'll cover the rear, Lobster Soup said after dispatching a demon with a shot. Ha ha, then I'll trouble you. See you in an hour, Erlongu said, not wasting a moment. He fell in behind Mephiston and the Blood Angels as they pulled back. Brothers, for the Emperor! Lobster Soup led the 13th's elite forward. They fought with bravery, but the enemy numbers were crushing. The players were soon overwhelmed. The special squad raced for the boarding deck where they had first materialized. There was a locked teleport coordinate there, the only place they could leave without recalibrating. The warp bled through the vengeful spirit, and the Chaos God's interference prevented the teleport lock from finding a target. They had to get back to their original landing point to escape. Mutants, Chaos Warriors, demons surged out without pause. Even past phantoms materialized and attacked. The gods are twisting time, pulling traitors from the Horus heresy, one player observed after killing an enemy in ancient armor. The traitor wore power armor from Horus's era. Veteran eyes could tell the subtle differences wrought by the Dark Mechanicum. Damn it, Horus? Erlongu Kangbazi's face hardened. The Emperor's final war with Horus had never respected linear time. A transcendent Horus crossing centuries was not impossible in the warp. The thought chilled him. Horus could appear 10,000 years later, kill them, then return 10,000 years earlier to die at the Emperor's hands. Time in the warp made such loops plausible. More enemies came in unending waves. Even the dead members of the Four Kings Council rose to oppose them. Then a familiar face from the past strode into view, Garviel Loken of the Shadow Moon Wolves. He looked at the squad as if they were the monsters he had been fighting, a man seeing a nightmare made real. Damn it, Erlongu spat. The Chaos Gods loved this trick, plucking warriors from the Great Crusade and mixing eras to spawn countless foes. There was no time to parley. Protecting Sanguinius and getting him off the vengeful spirit was the priority. Erlongu engaged Loken. The wolf's skill was formidable, but Erlongu fought with the Emperor's blessing and special powers. After a quick exchange, he kicked Loken aside and broke for the teleport pad. Horus has just become War Master. If enemies can wreck the flagship and walk away, he'll lose face, Loken barked, blood in his mouth. 10th Company, do whatever it takes to hold the line and defend the honor of the wolf god. He pursued the fleeing enemy instead of chasing the squad. The special squad did not seek kills. They sought a breakthrough. Other teams arrived intermittently to blunt the enemy tide, but by the time they reached the boarding deck, something worse awaited them. Time itself had stopped. The vengeful spirit had been pulled into the warp proper. We're trapped. Mephiston's voice cut through the panic. His psychic senses were exquisitely tuned to warp fluctuations. Stepping onto the teleportation platform, he felt that time and space had been contorted by the gods. Erlongu tried to hail allied fleets. There was no answer. Outside the hull, there was no void, only a seething ocean of warp light and titanic things rising and falling in that Tzeentchian sea. Their many eyes watched the ship, like predators examining a toy. The vengeful spirit has fallen into the warp, Erlongu said, misery on his face. The Chaos Gods were returning to their old stratagem. This ship had once been an anchor through which they had dragged Terra into a warp hell. Through Horus, they had reached deep into Holy Terra and stalled reinforcements, turning hours into forever. That catastrophe had cost Sanguinius and nearly broken the Emperor. Now the gods tried the same trick again to prevent his revival. Howling filled the corridors as demons poured into the hangar bay. Sanguinius, in soul form, was blinding in the warp, spear in hand, cutting down fiends as easily as a butcher slices vegetables. But the demons were innumerable and immortal, slain ones reformed moments later. If this keeps up, we're finished. Mephiston's howl turned strange as black sigils crept over his face and armor. A horrendous aura coalesced, and spectral wings of nightmare sprouted behind him. He became the Black Archangel, a crushing torrent of power that sought to cleave a path to Holy Terra. A dark corridor opened, and at its end the lawful light of Terra shimmered like a distant beacon. But a vast thing in the warp, an immense, many-eyed colossus, rumpled and issued a low noise. Instantly, the eyes along its body mirrored the dark corridor Mephiston had carved. A strange light spread through the creature, and the passage in its vision warped and kinked. The corridor bent and snapped shut. Mephiston reeled from the backlash and spat blood. "They won't let us leave." A Blood Angel's librarian's face crumpled. It wasn't only the warp gods. The nameless abominations that circled the vengeful spirit hungered to devour the galaxy. Heavy footsteps drowned the screams. The screaming throng fell silent and peeled away, opening a path down a dark corridor. Then a titanic figure entered, armored to impossible scale, wielding an exaggerated warhammer in one hand, while the other hand bristled with claws. Each footstep was an act of divine oppression, as though a god had walked into the mortal world. "You really are a jinx," Budong Goju Xuan elbowed Erlongu. "Horus has shown up. We're done for." Erlongu's eyes went wide. "Forget the revival. An hour from now, we'll be arranging a funeral for Mephiston." Aboard Macragge's honor, Gilliman still lay unconscious in the ship's medbay. Lionel Johnson watched his brother with a face drawn and worried. Given a Primarch's recovery, Gilliman should have woken long ago. "Why hasn't he?" he asked. "The Regent's wound is not physical but spiritual," an Eldar seer answered. "Uton's death shattered his soul. He must mend it himself, otherwise no one can help him." The seers explained that the love of Gilliman's adoptive parents had kept warp corruption at bay. His adoptive mother's death had blasted that love into his core, almost shattering him. "Saint, what do we do?" Lion asked Qin Yun. Qin Yun had just finished checking new skills earned with level up. He'd risen from LV-21 to LV-22 after the brutal fights and learned several new powers. "Let him sleep," Qin Yun said. "A parent's love will bring a lost child home. We only have to wait." "Uton is dead," one seer said. "Even her soul is annihilated." "No," Qin Yun shook his head. "Even if Uton's soul is gone, a mother's love for her child does not simply vanish. It will bring him back. And if Guilliman refuses, she will tap his head with her staff until he returns. We just wait." Shieling appeared beside Qin Yun to report the special squad status. "Those 4 in the warp are beyond shameless," she breathed. Qin Yun looked at Lion. "Look after your brother. I'm going to help Sanguinius first." Before Lion could object, Qin Yun's body dissolved into a shaft of light and vanished. On the vengeful spirit, the special squad had fallen into despair at Horus's presence. There was no beating him. Just as their mission seemed doomed, golden light exploded across the battlefield. Qin Yun reappeared, leading a host of players and the Cursed Legion. Power surged from him, driving the demons back and wrenching a corridor open toward Holy Terra. "You take the Archangel and go. I'll cover the rear," Qin Yun commanded, facing Horus alone. 2 suns, one golden, one black, flared and overlapped behind him. "Go," the wounded Mephiston ordered without hesitation. The retreat began. Another chapter. Thank you for your support. 300. The hot man is back. Horus watched Mephiston and the others slip through the opened portal and intended to follow. Qin Yun stepped into his path. "Your enemy is me, Horus." Horus's body was swelled with the power of the Chaos Gods. His frame had become colossal, radiating an oppressive aura that made even the stars seem to shiver. "You've made a very foolish decision to call me an enemy." "I rather enjoy doing foolish things," Qin Yun said calmly. "If you want to keep your brother, you'll have to get past me." "You are very much like my brother," Horus replied. "You have his wings, his wisdom, and there's no need for you to serve my foolish father." "Serve your father?" Qin Yun sounded amused. "If that were my purpose, I wouldn't be standing here." "You are different," Horus said. "You think you fight for the Emperor. I have always fought for humanity." "You've been deceived by him," Horus spat, lifting his massive warhammer. "He has fooled everyone with lies." "But humanity was saved because of him," Qin Yun countered. "No liar would bring such suffering on himself for the sake of others. He has suffered greatly, and for his people and his promise, he continues to suffer. If a lie can be sustained for a lifetime, it becomes truth. He only wants to become a god. That is his disguise. If he wanted to become a god, he wouldn't need a disguise. You have the power of the Chaos Gods now. You should have seen the future. Your father is the Dark King, the 5th Chaos God. Even without those deeds, he would become the Dark King." Horus growled low, the malign light surrounding him thickening. Words no longer reached him. To admit he was wrong now would be to collapse. Whatever remained of Horus's mortal conscience had long since been devoured by his children's betrayals. Only darkness sustained him in holy terror. Light surged from Qin Yun like a rising sun. This was no mere duel. It was a clash between gods. Horus charged, hammer raised. He struck with a blow that warped the space around it. Qin Yun spread pure white wings and met him with a long spear. The spear and the warhammer met with a deafening clang, the impact shuddering up through the deck. Qin Yun seized the moment. His spear flared ethereal like a god-sent lance. He spun 2.5 turns and slammed it down toward Horus's head. Horus raised a gigantic claw to block. The shockwave that followed swept across the deck, briefly dispelling the shadows and silencing the demon's whispers. Qin Yun followed with a lightning kick to Horus's jaw, forcing the Primarch to stagger back. "You were the Emperor's favored son. He gave you his love, and you betrayed him," Qin Yun said. Qin Yun's spear became a storm. Blow after blow rained down on Horus, each strike driven with terrible force. Black, bile-like blood spurted from the wounds, splattering the deck. The damage should have been fatal, but Horus's body healed with brutal speed. "You cannot harm me," he intoned, "no matter what you do." "I don't need to win," Qin Yun breathed. "I only need to hold you." He drove his spear into the deck. A roaring force erupted. A violent surge threw the surrounding demons and Horus back. The War Master, who had been teleported with them, felt the blast and barked over the comms, "When do we get to show off?" Shi Lang replied with a grin, even through the static. "Every time. I just watch the guide show off." "Ha ha ha. Aren't those little skirmishes enough for you? Every time you drop in from the atmosphere, you practically scream, 'Look at me' on your forehead," another player teased. The players traded jibes and bullets as they formed a defensive line around Qin Yun. The Cursed Legion fought alongside them, spitting infernal rounds that tore the demons apart. Enemies from every time point of the vengeful spirit converged. The Loyalist forces had already retreated down the other passages Qin Yun had torn open, escaping the starship that Chaos now controlled. Game over. Horus rose again, eyes burning with dark light. His noble features were washed in a sickly, bloody glow. Qin Yun struck, but this time the Primarch seized his attack and slammed him with the full weight of his hammer. Bones shattered like glass. Qin Yun's armor cracked. He was thrown across the deck and crashed down. "You are not my match," Horus's voice thundered across the vengeful spirit. Horus stalked toward the prone figure, each step a quake. Qin Yun let faith surge through him, knitting his wounds to, then sprang up with spear readied. Horus parried with one claw, grabbed the hammer in the other, and smashed upward. Qin Yun's jaw splintered. He was thrown through the air again. The players watched, the color draining from their faces. "He's being destroyed. If the guide can't handle Horus, none of us stand a chance," the War Master said. "Support the guide," he ordered. "Everyone, move up." They tried, but the traitors and demons closed ranks. Every face they fought seemed to be a version of themselves, dragged from other points in the vengeful spirit's timeline, an ugly demonstration of the Chaos God's power to manipulate fate. "Defend the honor of the Wolf God," Loken roared, charging at the enemy. He didn't know where they came from, but some instinct told him not to let them escape. They had to be kept aboard the vengeful spirit. Qin Yun coughed blood, battered to the deck. Horus lifted his hammer again and drove it down. Qin Yun blocked but was thrown hard, slamming onto the deck and coughing up blood. The shadows writhed and mocked his resolve. The ancient Chaos Gods watched and fed Horus power, eager to display their might to this intruder. Qin Yun beat on his wings, trying to climb free and buy time. Horus seized his ankle and slammed him into the deck so hard the sound rang through the ship. "Surrender," Horus said, voice flat. "You wish?" Qin Yun rasped. Horus clamped him in one claw and held him up. The spear dropped from Qin Yun's fingers and skittered across the metal. His fingers scrabbled for purchase, but he could not break free. "You have no right to refuse," Horus sneered, and began to hammer him down, blow after crushing blow, grinding faith into pain. Each time Qin Yun's wounds healed, faith filled him anew, only to be torn apart on the next strike. From the corner of his vision, Qin Yun watched Mephiston and the others flee through the open passage. Sanguinius's soul, before slipping away, looked back. His golden eyes were oceans of sorrow. Go, his look commanded. Get out of this prison that had held him 10,000 years. When Sanguinius left and the gate to Holy Terra shut, Qin Yun found a voice that had not yet been broken. Enough, he cried. Horus lifted him again, asking, Are you surrendering? Qin Yun spat in his face. Don't be ridiculous, I'm telling you. It's over. Golden light erupted from his broken body as if a sun had been kindled within him. A flicker of panic crossed Horus's face. He lunged to stop it, but it was too late. The light swept the vengeful spirit. Demons and ancient creatures screamed, seeing their doom in that blinding radiance. The explosion tore through the warp. Screams and shrieks filled it. The players who had followed Qin Yun melted into the light, consumed by it. Then, in an instant, the light was gone. The vengeful spirit was empty. Qin Yun and the Emperor had fled like devils pursued. The Chaos Gods, poised to strike and press their advantage, stared at the vacant deck in stunned fury. This outsider and the cursed, shameless, the warmonger thought, if they can't win, they flee. During the Great Crusade on the Vengeful Spirit, 1 year after Horus's promotion to War Master at Ulanor, Loken bolted awake, heart-pounding. He had been ripped by a terrible vision. Invaders on the Vengeful Spirit, the 10th Company slaughtering to meet them, a storm of energy sweeping across the ship. In that storm, he had seen the future, the betrayal of Horus, a duel between Horus and the Emperor on the Vengeful Spirit, Horus's fall and the Emperor grievously wounded, and finally, the traitor's knife in the back, delivered by Erebus. The memory was evaporating, slipping like water through his fingers. The universe was correcting the anomaly. I must record Horus's betrayal, Loken muttered, springing from his bed. He needed paper and ink, but his room was bare. For the first time, he cursed his ascetic life. There was no pen, no records. He threw on his robe and ran. He raced through the corridors to tell the first person he met. The memory dwindled with every step, leaving him with a hollow, dreadful certainty that he had forgotten something vital, something that concerned the fate of the galaxy. Cinderman, he called when he saw Kirill Cinderman, chief remembrancer. Help me! Cinderman turned at the sight of Loken's wild face. Loken lurched and tripped, falling forward. Are you all right? Cinderman asked, reaching to steady him. Loken sat back on his heels, breathless. I'm fine, but I've forgotten something important. Cinderman studied him worriedly. You might have suffered a shock, post-battle strain, perhaps. Keep this to yourself, Loken pleaded, struggling to remember what had spurred him out of bed. Don't tell anyone about my state. Inside the webway, Rodigus the Rainfather led a plague army against a human defensive fortification. The Death Guard thundered forward in rusted armor, their bloated forms shrugging off wounds as they breached the Imperium's lines. Sorcery shattered the fort's shields, plague flies swarmed the defenders. Despair gripped the garrison until the roar of engines split the air. Hundreds of jet bikes cut through the demonic tide at impossible speed. An ancient Aquila banner whipped in their wake. On the lead bike, towering and resolute, rode Jagatai Khan of Chogoris. The Khan had returned to stand with humanity. He drove his bike into the surge, his keen scimitar carving a path through the Daemon tide. Go back to your hells, Jagatai Khan declared coldly, and rode on.